Obviously, as a Bitcoiner, you kind of like see everything related to the money being the problem, the root of the problem. But it's also kind of insane to see how many people who are experiencing these issues, they know about their problem, but they have no idea why. We're in 2025, and we're talking about fascism and communism as if we were in 1925. I see protests in front of these migrant hotels. I see these communist marches. I mean, it's now happening in the physical, in the meat space realm. But we need more people that are politicians, that are leaders, that are political leaders who can actually talk about these things in a non-academic way that can bring more people to understand what is the real problem. It's not about left or right, it's about the money.
Fernando Nikolić, welcome, man.
Thank you so much, Archie. It's a pleasure to be with you, and thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. What are you doing in London?
Just enjoying the city. I'm a big Anglophile. Love British culture. Love England. And this year we just wanted to stay in London. So
are you with family here?
Yeah. And that's it. We would just love coming back and spending time here.
What's your favorite thing to do when you're in London?
Just be with British people, man. Just the banter, the conversations is so awesome. That is the number one thing. And then apart from that, I think London is just an insane city. There's so much to do, so much to see, amazing places to eat. So just enjoying it, man.
So if you just paid attention online, people would give you the impression that London is falling apart. It's falling to pieces. What would you say to those people?
I mean, I do understand that I see everything from a very privileged bubble. I'm here essentially as a glorified tourist with more time on my hand than the regular average tourist. So I see it through rose-tinted glasses. I think probably the reality of living here is probably very different than the time that I'm spending here. But I think that goes for any place in the world, right? So I just know what I like and I go after it and I want to experience it. But I do recognize that for a lot of people, things are pretty tough. And obviously, as a Bitcoiner, you kind of like see everything related to the money being the problem, the root of the problem. But it's also kind of insane to see how many people who are experiencing these issues, they know about their problem, but they have no idea why, or their like idea of what the solution is just completely unrelated to the real cause of this. So seeing stuff like walking around the streets and seeing like posters and stickers for like communist marches and stuff like that.
Are you seeing that? I haven't seen any of that yet.
Yeah. Well, it's like side by side the signs of like, put your phone in your pocket because this area is very high, chances for getting robbed. I see a lot of youth congregating under like communist slogans and banners, which is absolutely insane. And I talked about this also with Peter McCormack. We were talking about that in his podcast too. Is like it's weird to see this type of extreme far left ideology kind of like growing. At the same time, the far right ideology is also growing here in England, and seeing those two extreme factions kind of like getting more and more momentum is kind of scary. You see that in the content on YouTube, on Twitter, and whatever, but you also see it on the streets now, and that's kind of like where it starts to change and become serious. When people are actually doing stuff in the streets. I see protests in front of these migrant hotels. I see these communist marches. I mean, it's now happening in the physical, in the meat space realm. And I think it's interesting. Last year when I was here, I didn't see that as much. This year is a little bit more intense. So yeah, let's see what happens.
Looking for a secure, trusted way to buy, sell, and hold Bitcoin? Gemini has been leading the way since 2014. Founded by the Winklevoss twins to be a security-first, fully regulated Bitcoin platform. With Gemini, your Bitcoin is protected with enterprise-grade security, backed by insurance and Type 2 certifications for SOC 1 and SOC 2. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or a long-time hodler, Gemini gives you the tools to stack sats and build generational wealth your way. From simple one-tap buys to advanced charts and trading features, it's all here. Buy, sell, and hold securely. That's Gemini. Gemini. Bitcoin with confidence. Need cash without selling your Bitcoin? With DeBiFi, you borrow against your Bitcoin, non-custodial, multi-sig escrow, and you keep your keys. No banks, no selling, just institutional-grade liquidity with terms up to 2 years and APRs as low as 9%. All transactions are signed using private keys on your own device. Using a 3 of 4 multi-sig setup, 3 out of 4 keys must approve every transaction, giving you control, transparency, and peace of mind. Whether you're a hodler, miner, small business, or treasury team, DeBiFi gives you the cash you need now without giving up your Bitcoin upside or triggering a taxable event. Get liquidity, keep exposure, and stay secure. That's DeBiFi. DeBiFi, your Bitcoin, your money. You said it's weird to see that sort of thing, but I would have said that it's an entirely expected outcome, that when people are facing desperation, that they resort to political action. So I think it's a perfectly normal thing for people to do in a democracy, and entirely predictable if you just look at the history of this country, which people become very politically active, where I think in Australia, where I'm from, political apathy is much more entrenched because we've had it so good for so long. And even on a relative basis right now, Australia's doing exceedingly well compared to its developed nation peers. So, like, why do you think it's weird to see that? Or is perhaps unexpected a better word?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that is a very natural trait of humans to look for explanations or scapegoats through ideological lenses. I think you're totally right. What is weird, in my opinion, is that we're in 2025 and we're talking about fascism and communism as if we were in 1925. And that is surprising to me because I think the reality is so different. We are living in a completely different time. And the fact that young people are going to both these fascist and communist sides is extremely weird, because I think we need to take a look at this in a new way. Things are not the same anymore. It's not comparable to 100 years ago, but we're still talking in this language. And I think that's the weird part, I guess.
What do you think those two ideologies, they were, I guess we can call them defeated ideologies of the 20th century. Why do you think they're taking hold again? What is the appeal to our, I guess, base nature that makes them so susceptible to be revived in times of desperation?
Well, I think, desperation has always been part of humanity. There's always been times of desperation. What I think is, to answer your question, is I think we live in a media landscape right now where everything is fragmented, everything is splintered into 1,000 million pieces, and it's too much for the average individual to actually have a nuanced 360-degree view of what's happening and who's talking about what. And there's no time to actually sit down and read a bunch of books or read different opinions and get inspiration and influence from different sources these days, because a lot of people are struggling. They have 2-3 part-time jobs at the same time. They have a family to take care of. They're just busy, right? I think we are at all-time high of busyness in terms of, average individuals. And that makes people crave for very simple solutions, very simple explanations. And that is kind of like the beauty of the left. They have really, they're marketing geniuses over there, they really are able to distill a lot of the many reasons why things are problematic, and they just point it at one direction only. And also they're very susceptible to young people as well. So I think a lot of young people, they identify with that, which is obviously, as we all know, the left are always the good ones, the right is the bad ones, and it's this black and white contrast that they use to make people feel good about joining their ranks and feel like we're the good ones and everybody else are Nazis. So it works. That's the thing about it. 100 years later, that it still works. But I don't think it's as relevant. We should be talking about these things in a different way. Bitcoin is definitely a centerpiece of that conversation, I think. Just monetary politics and monetary, how the system is working essentially on a fiat system. I think that's the real conversation to have, but I don't think it's too complex for people. We haven't really found those big political figures who can explain these things in a very simple way, maybe with the exception of Milei in Argentina. We can talk about him too. But we need more people that are politicians, that are leaders, that are political leaders who can actually talk about these things in a non-academic way, in a very simple way that can bring more people to understand what is the real problem. It's not about left or right. It's about the money. right?
Yeah, we've kind of jumped the gun a little bit. So why don't you give us an introduction to who you are, what you've done? I think that would be really good context for people to help understand your experience and where you're coming from.
Yeah. So I'm from Argentina, and I grew up in Argentina in the late 80s, and when my country went through like a hyperinflationary dumpster fire, which led my mom to emigrate to Norway. And I grew up between Argentina and Norway essentially until my 20s. And every time I came back, I always heard this topic of conversation of inflation. You know, inflation this, inflation that. My aunt, were talking about like grocery store strategies. My cousins were talking about like, okay, I know about this guy in this like underground, a currency exchange place that had really good rates because he really wanted to, buy as many dollars for as cheap as possible. Conversation like that was like literally over dinner, it was so common. And I thought, okay, this is probably how it is. But after coming back every single year for 15 plus years, the topic never changed. I was like, what's going on here? Why is this inflation such a problem, such an issue that everybody talks about nonstop, from my grandma to my young cousins? It's always a topic of conversation. So, tapping into my public education in Norway, I obviously had no clue because they don't teach you these things. And also there's like a high trust in government in Norway and stuff like that. And when a friend of mine introduced me to Bitcoin back in 2017, my experience with hyperinflation and seeing how inflation really destroys the social fabric of a community, of a country, in terms of like a lot of people fleeing the country and going elsewhere to build their future. Bitcoin just clicked for me instantly. And in my career before that, I came from the music business. So I had like a very entrepreneurial in the beginning. I had my own record label early on. It got bought by Universal Music in Norway, at that time EMI Music. And I started in EMI Music after I exited my record label. And during that time in the late aughts, 2008-ish, there was a lot of controversy with the Pirate Bay guys over in Sweden. And one of the co-founders was a Norwegian guy, and he was in my social circle. So I follow the Pirate Bay things very closely while I was like working at the Big Bad Wolf, one of the big 4 record labels in the world. And I understood that torrenting, the technology behind what the Pirate Bay was offering, was something that really was going to change the way we distribute media, film, music, literature, whatever. And I wanted to really embrace that while working at Universal Music. The executive hated me. I rage quit the industry, but I always wanted to be part of like technology that has a disruptive nature. So when all of that in 2017, my friend introduced me to Bitcoin, and I came with that experience from both Argentina and working in Universal Music during the torrent wars, you can call it that. It was like, okay, this is it. And ever since, I've been massive Bitcoiner, and the last 4 years I've been working at Blockstream as the VP of Marketing Communications, working alongside Adam Back and one of the brightest minds in the Bitcoin space. And up until today, 3 weeks ago, I quit Blockstream, and I launched my own business called Perception, which is a intelligence platform for Bitcoin, stablecoins, and tokenized equities, essentially emerging finance, because I see the same disruption that I saw in Universal, that I saw with Bitcoin. I see that also happening in the media. So yeah, that's essentially me.
Man, living through the proliferation of P2P music file sharing was that were like the golden years of my youth. I really enjoyed that a lot because suddenly you just had access to all this music that previously was only accessible if you bought a single or an album. I mean, kids today, do they even know what albums are? Like the idea of buying an album from an artist that you absolutely love and sitting down listening to it track by track in the sequence that the artist curated their album was an experience in and of itself. I mean, I'm not sure if people do that. I know, for example, like Taylor Swift fans are really into her releases, and Beyonce fans, but like every artist used to have their album launch was an event for their fans. Whereas now it's kind of like, yeah, I like this song from this artist, and that's all I know about them, and I just move on to the next single. It's really hard to follow a career for me now. But maybe that's a thing of getting old as well. So it's like, yeah, but it was incredibly energizing and refreshing. I think Napster was the first major application that I recall using. And then from there were all these other, I think LimeWire at one point was massive. And it wasn't just music that we could share. It was also films and TV shows and everything like that. So that, for me, that was like the first major application online that just completely demolished an industry. I mean, we had IRC before and was it AOL chat and all that, and they were they were innovations. ICQ, all these sorts of things were innovations about helping people communicate, but they didn't really disrupt an industry the way Napster disrupted the music industry. When that started, when Napster took off, what was the initial reaction in the music industry? Can you share that with us? Yeah. Because I think there are really good parallels, obviously, with what's happening with Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is an awesome question because it's totally like you can draw parallel lines between the evolution of these two things. The reaction is exactly the same. So all these executives, and I lived it. I was in these board meetings. They just wanted to stop it. Like, this is something we got to stop. We got to put these people in jail. We got to close down the domain. We got to just evaporate all of this. And they fought it. They tried. You know, at the time that I'm speaking about, I mean, torrenting wasn't that new. So by that time, it was so big that the Pirate Bay guys were going through a lot of like legal. They were going through lawsuits. I think all the Universal Studios, the record labels, they put all their legal teams, all the legal power, and put so much money into this, the cease and desist letters and all of that, and they did go to a Swedish court and they did get sentenced, and they became successful in closing down the site for a little bit of time, but right now, I mean, it's everywhere. And then essentially, when they understood that this is a battle that we can't win, they bent the knee. And somebody like Spotify, also Swedish, by the way, came along. And essentially when Spotify had there was so many people who wanted Spotify in the US. US was like the last country, I think, to ever get Spotify. And once they did, I think all the 4 biggest record labels, they cut the checks. And I think they got a 18-19% stake of the shares, the 4 big ones amongst themselves. So that Spotify could be launched in the US. And essentially what they did, they took the MP3s and they wrapped it in a Spotify platform, right? And right now there's a lot of, and I've been tweeting about this too, like there's a lot of parallels between what's happening with Bitcoin right now, where, we had a period of time where there's a lot of politicians and institutions who wanted to just stop Bitcoin. I mean, good luck. I don't know how you do that. They've been putting so much money, so much political power into trying to stop developers, stop Bitcoin any way they could. And now they are realizing that it's not possible. It's an impossible task. So now they're thinking about how do we wrap Bitcoin into our financial instruments and these vehicles that we want to now offer to the public. So it's the same way the music business wrapped MP3s into the Spotify vehicle. They're now going to wrap Bitcoin in their vehicles to be able to offer it as well. So it's exactly the same timeline, a decade in between. It's so interesting.
I love the meme that, first they ignore you, then they laugh, then they fight, and then we win. Yeah. In the case of P2P music, the adoption was so rapid. My recollection of Napstar's rise was so rapid that there was no time to ignore or laugh. Mm-hmm. The music industry instantly got angry. Whereas with Bitcoin, I would say the first 10 years was either ignoring the first 5 years, and then the next 5 years it was mockery. And I think we've just gone through the they fight you phase, and that was put to an end with Trump's victory in the United States. And it was kind of short-lived, but I don't think the industry understood that they were in a fight until about 18 months before the election, and they put together the pack. I forget what the name of the pack was.
Crypto Army?
Is it Fair Shake or something like that?
I don't know.
You know, the one the Gemini brothers, Winklevoss brothers were supporting, and a whole bunch of others in the crypto industry. It was not a Bitcoin pack. It was a broader crypto political action committee that kicked into gear. And then I think it was in response to Elizabeth Warren explicitly stating that she was building an anti-crypto army.
Yeah.
And the industry started realizing with, a whole bunch of things happening through regulatory bodies that we were in a fight for survival. I think we were in a fight and we didn't understand that we were in a fight. And once they kicked into gear, I don't recall a short campaign by any political action committee that's just been so effective so quickly. So, everyone who was part of that, congratulations to them. A fantastic job.
Definitely.
And I think Bitcoin is now and then we win. But it's I see a lot of hearts being broken on the timeline about the nature of that victory and what it actually looks like. And perhaps there was a bit of self-delusion and people were a bit ideologically blinded by what adoption is going to look like, because the system always co-opts an innovation in a way that befits the system. It's rare that an innovation changes an system entirely, but we may well have the last laugh in that regard, I think. So I'm interested in your comments about what we're seeing in Bitcoin with respect to adoption, or perhaps even, some commentary about the earlier stages of that meme for Bitcoin as well, and any parallels that you see with the music industry's reaction to music streaming, because they didn't get it and they didn't want to get it. And my understanding and my recollection from those days is the music industry just got immediately angry and tried to fight immediately, because the threat was very immediate. There was no long build-up of adoption. It was almost within 6 months, everybody was file sharing, and it just seems strange. Like every teenager all over the world was instantly file sharing. So interested in your thoughts on that.
Man, there's so much to say. I think to comment on the first point, the fact that the music business people didn't see it coming is because since the get-go, they have just been middlemen, right? They were not the artists. They were not into the music scene, whatever scene they were not rappers, they were not indie artists, they were not DJs. They had absolutely no clue. They just were. Their position was of an extractive nature, so they had no clue what was going on. So that's why they reacted the way they reacted, because they were not insiders in a way, right? They were just third parties that just found out a business model that was extractive, and they had the monopoly of the distribution. That was kind of like a little carrot that they dangled over any artists who want to make it ahead. So they had absolutely no clue, and it came as a shock because of that reason. Now with Bitcoin and fixing the money or changing the money, the people that you're talking about are very well insiders, and they are working with government too. So these are the people who are creating the bonds, the equities. They are the ones that are in the central bankers and speaking with the government. So these people are insiders, and I think with that comes a lot of hubris, perhaps. So that's when they saw something like Bitcoin and they didn't take it seriously, because they know how much power they had. They know how much control they have. So they were kind of like arrogant about it. And that was a blessing in disguise looking back, right? Because now we had so many years where we can really focus on making Bitcoin solid and robust and battle testing it live before hitting the real stage. So I think that's the big difference between the two. Record labels, no idea. Third-party extractors. These people in the money, in the financial world, are total insiders, and the hubris that came with that made them not take Bitcoin seriously right away. I think that's the main difference. Now, in terms of parts of Bitcoin, the Bitcoin community not liking how things are looking right now, I think it's kind of sad, because on one side, everybody is propagating the meme of, Bitcoin is going to take over the world, hyper Bitcoinization, et cetera, and like, don't you think what second, third, fourth order of that meme means? That means the suit coiners are going to come here. That means, yes, paper Bitcoin summer is going to happen. I mean, how did you not think that was going to happen? You say that we're going to replace the fiat money. we're gonna scale bitcoins to billions, and there's not gonna be a financialization aspect of that. I think is completely naive, and I feel bad for some of the people that I see in my timeline that are like screeching about this, because they come from a very ideological background where I guess the P2P circular economies, like the low level usage of Bitcoin means the most to them. And by all means, I think that's important too. But you have to figure out the entire piece of the puzzle here. And that's just a very small aspect of what replacing fiat money or having Bitcoin be the global reserve currency is. So it's a very short-sighted way of thinking. And I think a lot of the loudest voices in Bitcoin, unfortunately, have been kind of short-sighted in their thinking. Looking back now, like looking at how they are reacting to these things, which is sad. But I think at the same time, they do have an important role in preserving that like cypherpunk P2P idealistic part of Bitcoin. I hope that never vanishes. I hope there's more people in the future who are inspired by the cypherpunk ideology and they want to continue doing that part of the culture. But right now, Bitcoin is growing up. It's a teenager that is about to become an adult, and things change. And if you want to make some fun of it, I think it's kind of like we are now entering, the phase where Bitcoin is becoming pop and mainstream. To bring it back to the music analogy, and there's a lot of people who discovered Bitcoin first when Bitcoin was underground that are now mad that Bitcoin is becoming mainstream and commercial. It's the Bitcoin hipsters, essentially. And I guess that's part of adoption. Things will fragment into different factions, and every faction will hold up the Bitcoin ideology in their own way. But I think it's the total sum of that will make Bitcoin even more robust, and the chances of survival of Bitcoin is going to increase by an order of magnitude. The more different people come into the space and use Bitcoin for whatever their need is. There's a very important thing that Bitcoin can signify for people in Latin America who want to build circular economies. There's a lot of importance for people in Africa who just want to get paid in Bitcoin and just stash it to just preserve their purchasing power. There's a lot of value for German cryptographers who want to work on the cryptography aspect. And there's a bunch of value for, a suit in Chicago in the CME who just want to, use the properties of Bitcoin to just gain money. I think all of these reasons are fair. There's no one good or one bad use of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is so awesome that it means so many different things to so many different people, and that is the recipe for success if you want Bitcoin to really become global.
Yeah, I love that, and especially because a lot of these people who are upset love to tell others Bitcoin doesn't care. when they have a complaint, yeah. Right? But when it's something that they don't like, it's all like, throw the toys out of the cot sort of thing. And it's like, well, actually, Bitcoin doesn't care for you too. It doesn't care for your ideology. It is what it is. It's a neutral protocol that everyone can relate to it in whichever way they have a need that's most acute. And so I don't have a need right now to use Bitcoin as a transaction platform. I don't need it because I transact fine. Mm-hmm. I need a store of value though.
Exactly.
Right.
And that even more so for people like from Argentina. Like as an Argentinian, very early on, I told you my family, my cousins, my grandma were talking about inflation, right? Part of that, conversations that you have very early on results in you essentially understanding at a very young age that the pesos that you earn are the first thing you need to spend because you have no idea how much that peso is going to be devalued in a week, in a month, in 3 months from now. It becomes second nature. It's something that you don't even think about. And
so consumption as a store of value is a very real calculation that people have to make.
Right.
I have to buy something because the money is going to be worth less very quickly. Mm-hmm. And that something is going to act as a store of value greater than my money in and of itself, exactly. Which is a completely different way of thinking for many people who've lived in relatively stable Western societies. Like that's been the environment in which I've only known. I've never known anything else. Mm-hmm. And so in our countries, in our cultures, spending the money was deemed to be profligate. No, you save your money. And so explain to us what sort of things people would buy to store their value, other than sort of precious metals and anything else that they might have access to in that way? What kind of consumption materials or consumer choices would people make?
Well, first of all, you just need to pay your bills and buy all the necessities for the month, right? So it's like food, water, pay all your bills, pay your rent, all the basics. And then with whatever you have left, you're not saving that. You start to think, I need to put this money somewhere. And, in places like Argentina, where, this type of attitude, extrapolated by almost everyone who makes money, who has a salary, or get paid in Argentina, when that attitude prevails, it creates an insane demand for US dollars, right? And US dollars have historically been the, choice for storing whatever savings that you have. And to the degree that the government throughout so many decades have just put capital controls into place. So you're not allowed to, through legal means, to actually get however many dollars you want to save. So people, as a result, it's not like they're saying, oh, yeah, you're right, man, the government doesn't want me to get US dollars. Maybe I shouldn't think about it. No, they just think about other ways to do it. So you see weird store of values like olive oil, bricks. They just literally buy bricks, store it there, and then when they need cash flow to buy something, they sell the bricks because the bricks have they store value better than the Argentine peso. And that's just two examples of many, many different, you wouldn't believe how creative Argentine.
How are they selling it? Is it you go and try to barter that for something else, or is it literally for a means of exchange? So you might sell them for cash and then use that cash again for something else.
Yeah. You just go to where they sell bricks and, hey, give me X amount of bricks, and then you get rid of your cash that way, and then you take the bricks home, you store it in your garage or something. And then when you need money, you resell the bricks for probably a bigger amount of pesos that you bought it for. It's just insane how people that have already a very messed up reality, right? Because you go outside in the streets in Argentina, obviously there's better places and worse places, but as a whole, you can't be yourself. You can't be free. You can't have good sneakers. You can't show that you're wealthy. You can't wear a watch. You always have this, I don't know, this part of the brain that is always looking around when you go. It's not safe. So if that's not bad enough, you also need to become your financial director of your family to kind of how the hell do I navigate all these insane BS that is happening with the Argentine peso? So yeah, bricks, olive oil, canned food, anything. Outside of I think lately the capital, with Milei, capital controls is not a thing anymore. But last time before Milei, I think the monthly cap was $200, $200 US dollars a month that you could legally exchange. But then, these type of artificial controls only, creates a demand for people to search out for underground solutions, alternative solutions. And that's why stablecoins, that's why Tether is so successful, because that is the use case that Argentinians need, and many other countries as well. But for Argentina specifically, US dollar is kind of the way Westerners look at Bitcoin. Argentinians, they look at the US dollar. It's the store of value for them. So when stable coins give you that unlimited cap and you can actually transact how much you want without thinking about capital controls, then obviously Tether and stable coins become a thing. And another thing that Bitcoiners are also hating, right? A lot of people are saying, well, they should just use Bitcoin instead of stable coins. And yes, obviously, the US dollar is also a fiat money that also evaporates over time and loses value and is programmatically debased. But the learning curve, when you come from places like Argentina, Turkey, Venezuela, Iran, where there's so few financially literate people, at least, the literacy is from a household level. You understand inflation because, oh shit, milk is more expensive. And then you deduct from there. But in terms of how money works, how debasement work, how much pesos are in circulation. Nobody has any clue of how that works. So it becomes a very like simple thing where you're just like, hey, I need to store value, and US dollar is the standard. And Bitcoin becomes too abstract, and they need way longer time than a Westerner actually needs, So I think Bitcoiners that are criticizing people for adopting stablecoins are just too harsh. They have absolutely no empathy towards people because it's survivalship bias at the highest level. Like for you, Bitcoin works perfectly, but you come from a very distinct, very different background, and you can't compare yourself and your success with the average Argentinian, the average Turkish, or Venezuelan. It's just there's no empathy. So need better Bitcoiners, man. We need Bitcoiners that know the full spectrum. But I do think it's getting a little bit better, but I'm also afraid because the media is so fragmented that once you find like an influencer or two that you trust, it's very hard to get out of that algorithmic trap. It's very hard to get out of these echo chambers. So I'm very worried that people will just find the wrong influencers and look at Bitcoin as like, I don't know, speculative trading type because there's so much content being produced for that they will never be able to go deeper in and kind of like learn about, how money works and stuff like that. But, that's the responsibility we all have to have, I guess.
I think you touched on a really interesting point about, I guess, maximalist culture, if you want to say. But I really don't even want to give them maximalism, because maximalism is something that a lot of people can buy into without resorting to a blinkered worldview. I'm sure a lot of people at Blockstream are maximalists, but they don't go on the timeline and abuse people for having an opinion that's marginally outside the orthodoxy, for example, like with respect to stablecoins. And so I guess, the people who do have on-the-ground experience, they're much more focused on alleviating some kind of pressure or some kind of desperate need for whatever it is, means of exchange or store of value. And so they seem to be, like you said, much more empathetic towards solving problems rather than pushing ideology. And I always find it confusing that these people who are sitting quite comfortably on the timeline making all sorts of accusations of scammers or throwing insults around and like, hey, how does that help anybody other than just make you feel good about belonging in a subculture and perhaps even taking part in a circle jerk? Because quite often it just seems like people are posting for each other rather than to search for a solution to a problem. And I think that's where I always start, is like, that's what made me quite quickly accept that stablecoins were a necessary part. Because when I hear people like Alex Gladstein and people from his organization and other activists actually outline the material benefits of stablecoins, I don't care if it's on some chain that you have a problem with. Is it helping someone somewhere much easier than what Bitcoin can? Yeah, great. Mm-hmm. Can Bitcoin perhaps at some point overtake that requirement? Sure. When that happens, I'll be there championing that as well. And it's not. I see a lot of people writing off potential users in those countries as either being, not smart enough or too lazy to do this. And I think, no, it doesn't work that way. People look for the easiest, most readily available solution to use. And if the Bitcoin solution is not quite there yet, it has to compete in a free market. Like, we're all free marketeers, aren't we? Until we're not. Mm-hmm. So it's like, that's how I look at that. And I just wish people would be much more focused on solving problems rather than pushing ideologies. Ideology is good. And like you said, I hope, and I don't think we'll ever lose that cypherpunk subculture. I think that will always power a large part of the Bitcoin ecosystem. But what we're seeing now with Wall Street, I think it was inevitable. And I found it refreshing to hear Adam's take on it, which, if you didn't know much about Adam, which, I don't know too much about him. I know his background and everything. It was like, yeah, like, this guy's been trading markets since before Bitcoin.
Totally.
Right? And he's been into investments and all sorts of things, right? And he's trading, I think he told me he traded Forex at one point and a whole bunch of other stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, so like, if everyone who's who's into these Bitcoin treasury companies is a scammer, you might want to have a word to Adam Back about that.
Yeah.
Like, since your Bitcoin bona fides are much stronger than Adam Back's.
Right. I mean,
right?
kind of ridiculous. And also, but that's the thing that we talked about in the beginning of our convo, right? A lot of people today, they let ideology do their thinking for them. You know, they see the world through a specific lens backed by their ideology, because in the world that we're living right now, it's just too much information, too much stuff going on that you're just like, I have understood the world in this way. Let me just look at everything new that comes in the future through that lens, because that's my understanding of the world. And that Bitcoiners are not like this magical species that are outside human nature. There's so many people being captured by the exact same thing. So when they look at stuff like, oh, Argentinian stablecoin adoption is up 35% last year. And then their knee-jerk reaction is, but why hasn't Bitcoin adoption been even higher? That means you're looking through this thing with this lens from an ideological perspective and not really having empathy for the people that, like you said, are actually saving their purchasing power. Do you know how much that means? Like, just the fact that you living in a place like Argentina have the ability to save money and not lose your purchasing power over time. Dude, that is the thing that will, you know, if you extrapolate that to the entire society and you have a country where its people are actually gaining purchasing power over time, that means families are not going to be broken up because the father or somebody had to go to Spain and send money back, right? The same for El Salvador, the same for a lot of these countries who are losing the people who should stay in their countries and build that country and make it better. Those are the ones who leave. And, you know, if they don't have a reason to leave and they can actually stay because of, you know, saving in Tether, how can you be mad at that, bro? Like, you're looking at this the wrong way.
When you're experiencing pain, the first thing you want to do is alleviate the pain, right? So from a financial point of view, stability comes before prosperity.
Totally.
You can't be in a sinking ship and go, let's shoot for the moon, guys, and let's, you know, YOLO into Bitcoin. You're like, well, that's actually doesn't serve my purpose. I need to maintain or preserve my purchasing power now and for the immediate future. And for a lot of people, Bitcoin doesn't do that. And we need to recognize that it doesn't do that.
Yep.
And you can't just badger people with, well, over a 4-year period. It's like, mate, what are you talking about? 4 years, right?
Yep.
I can't plan financially that far ahead if I'm living in a country like that.
Exactly right. And it's also, you know, a lot of these people that are you know, anti-treasury companies are kind of like against the financialization of Bitcoin. But I think what we are talking about right now is a problem that is rooted in the commercialization of Bitcoin, which is...
How do you make that distinction? Financialization versus commercialization.
Financialization is essentially, in very layman terms, is Bitcoin is being used as the underlying asset to create a bunch of other derivatives, other assets that are backed by Bitcoin, instead of providing Bitcoin proper. Commercialization of Bitcoin is like businesses built around Bitcoin, offering services, offering products. And I think that has been, you know, at least the cycle from 2017 till today has been the commercialization of Bitcoin. Bunch of Bitcoin companies that really have flourished, that have gotten a lot of VC money, that is existing. And you have now, I don't know, 430,000 wallets. And you have, you know, there's a bunch of products that people can choose from. And you got to understand that a lot of these people who are against, you know, just stay on this topic of like the anti-stablecoin people. I don't know. To me, they look like they're sponsored by Lightning companies, right? They're sponsored by, or they have skin in the game in a way that for them, transacting in Bitcoin using Lightning is best for them because, I don't know, their business can grow or they can get more sponsorships if this circular economy, P2P use case grows, right? And I'm going to say nothing wrong with these incentives, to be honest. I mean, you should make money providing quality, providing service, educating, and stuff like that. But we can't ignore the fact that these people are being paid to double down on that specific message. The same way other people are getting paid for other type of messages. You have people that are financially incentivized to, talk shit about Bitcoin L2s or different L2s, but not this L2. So, that's something that I don't know if a lot of people realize, right? Because influencers, they have this, organic type of public profile that, they just create content and you don't think twice about it. But underneath there are sponsorships by companies who have a financial incentive to keep paying these influencers to say specific things. And I'm not like conspiracy theorying or anything like that. This is just facts. And I think in the process of that, as years go by and the commercialization of Bitcoin provides these type of content creators that are looking at things in a very, one-sided way, because in the times that we're living in, you need to be very, I don't want to say clickbaity, but you have to like have an extremely simplified way of communicating just to capture that attention, because there's a narrative warfare going on.
I can attest to that.
Yeah.
You do need to simplify to make sure that it's easily digestible, absorbable, but it also catches the attention,
exactly.
Right?
So that's a positive feedback loop, could be a negative feedback loop, but it's a feedback loop. And you gotta think about these things. But I don't think, again, this is my thesis, and I'm afraid I'm repeating myself now, but like people don't have the time to look under, the cover or whatever. They just take it for what it is. And if they like the guy, they like the person, they like their faces, they like their communication style, they're just going to follow that person, And then in the process of that, over a longer period of time, their brain will be wired the same way. And then you will have these type of opinions propagating over time, where a lot of like nobodies all of a sudden have a problem with Argentinians adopting stable coins. I'm just, exaggerating to make the point, but you know what I'm going with this. So it's a challenging time, because I think media is going to be even more splintered. People that want to grab people's attention need to be more extreme in their opinions to get that attention. I think the important thing is what you do with that attention once you grab it. And that's why I commend you, because if you look at your BTC archive posts on Twitter, it is very like, number go up, this is happening, caps lock stuff, and yeah, you get a lot of attention, you get a lot of audience with that. But then you do this podcast where you sit down with people and you talk with them for 2 hours and you go deep into topics. So it's like, what do you do with that attention once it's captured? I think that's going to like split the good influencers versus the bad.
I mean, the account has given me the opportunity to launch a podcast and have these types of conversations, which, if I had have been able to grow a podcast from day one at the same rate and be viable, I would have done that instantly instead of the account anyway. But like sometimes there's a natural order to things, and you've got to earn the right within a community to be able to then do bigger and better things. So about the sort of distributed nature of the media ecosystem, I actually think that's a really positive development, especially someone who grew up in the era of broadcast TV. And in Australia, it's much more concentrated than the United States, for example.
Still?
No, not still, because now there's the advent of pay TV and we have the internet, of course. But when I was growing up, we had 3 commercial broadcast networks and then 2 government-funded channels, the ABC and SBS. And so in terms of newspapers, we didn't really have too many national newspapers. Most of them were city-based, and they were essentially just more or less tabloid-style newspapers, right? So very easy to control narratives within a small population. There's really not a large enough market for dissenting views to be expressed in a viable alternative publication. Whereas now, with the internet, you do have a greater chance to do that in Australia. But it's still like, if you've got a YouTube channel and it's just catering to Australia, you'd be lucky to have 100,000 subs, maybe 200,000 if you're really, really good. But you need to have a broader reach. So I just want to bring that back to Bitcoin. Last cycle, how many people were doing breaking news? Maybe like 3 accounts. This cycle, we've probably got 100, right? But it doesn't have the same weight as, breaking news was really a valuable thing in the last cycle. It's not anymore because they all just whoever breaks the news first, just people copy them. And it's like, what's the point? Right? So what value are you adding? And it's not going to grow if you think you're going to grow your account doing breaking news the way I grew my account and documenting Bitcoin grew his account in the last cycle, like you're
Not
in
gonna
for a
happen.
rude surprise. I mean, you will grow somewhat, but it's not going to make a difference to you. And the reason why documenting Bitcoin and I grew a lot in the last cycle is because we were doing something that was quite unique in an underserved market that was rapidly growing, and we both recognized that opportunity. We're not associated, by the way, so it's a completely separate account, separate person. But I've got great respect for what they achieved, and they were first to start, and it inspired me to start as well. But I see a lot of media companies, I wouldn't even call them that, I would say just individuals who are in the space trying to do the same thing, and I'm like, good luck with that. And there have been a couple of businesses that have started. My respect goes out to everyone who persisted through the bear market or even started in the bear market and just grinded every single day. So like there's a company called Bitcoin News.com.
Yep.
They've done a great job. I mean, they literally started in the bear market when there was just nothing. And
shout out to them, by the way. They showed a lot of love to Bitcoin Perception from the very beginning. So,
good. Yeah, they're good lads. I've been in touch with them and encouraged their success. BitPain is another one, a massive shit stir online, but he's really good value as a personality. People might think he goes overboard, but that's Bitcoin as well. Stack Hodler, I met him about 3.5 years ago, or maybe even 4 years now. And, he was like maybe 15, 20,000. And he was thinking about what he could do in this space, right? And my advice to him was to find your own voice and find your own niche. And, if you don't know Stack Hodler, you should all look him up and follow him. I love reading his posts every day. And so if you don't have that unique voice in this space, then why would anybody follow you unless you're so large that, your account has a sort of gravity of its own. You're just not going to be able to find that space. But, we need, I really like what's happening with the Bitcoin Treasury media space. Is it Tim? I don't know his last name, but he's kind of made it his own thing. There have been these, Tim Klotzman?
Oh, yeah.
Is that his name? I'm sorry if I got that wrong. But I like what he's done in that space. He's found a lane and he's served it like nobody else was serving it. And he's got a really loyal following, very active community. Then there's the MicroStrategy, sort of the True North, Bulltards posting as well. And so like lots of little communities pop up as Bitcoin evolves and develops. And it's just a question of, who's going to serve that? Because I can't do everything. Bitcoin Magazine can't do everything. Documenting Bitcoin can't do everything. Or are you going to be an independent analyst who provides a unique point of view, for example? Whatever it is that you do, you've just got to find a lane rather than just copy everyone else. Because by the time you copy, there are going to be 30 other accounts copying and the effect is going to be diminished. But I like the plurality of it. I like that it's decentralized. I like that you can get lots of different opinions, such that, we have the most dedicated people, essentially the developers, having these heated discussions to the point where they're calling each other scammers and attacks on Bitcoin, which is absurd, right?
Yeah.
Because my understanding, like I read Adam Back's point the other day, he said, you can either censor spam or push for uncensorable Bitcoin. I know which side I'm on. I'm like,
that's it. That is it.
Yeah.
Censorship resistance or not. Which way, Western man?
Yeah.
It's really that simple. And I want to get your opinion on this. I'm actually very interested in your thoughts on this. What you were saying is exactly right. And I think, this is something that I'm trying to do with my own public profile as well. I mean, I kind of like reverse engineer everything that I've gone through and say, what are the combination of these things that makes for a unique story? And then let me just double, triple down on that. And like my background from Argentina with the music business and the torrenting wars with Bitcoin and now the media narrative wars, I think that's kind of like my niche. And I'm just going to I'm going to bulldoze with that. And I already see like very good traction just in the 3 weeks after I left Blockstream, and I'm like accelerated the shit posting. But I think that is indeed the formula, right? And I think, how do you think, this is going to affect Bitcoin adoption as a whole. Because what I think is you're going to have people just like doubling down on very specific niches. That makes total sense. These might be like total new use cases, total new views of looking at Bitcoin, which is going to be like so interesting for people, draw a lot of people in because it cuts through the noise and it doesn't like propagate the same BS that you see on everyone's timeline, right? But so let's say, we see 40, 50 of these new accounts that sees Bitcoin in a whole new way every cycle, every 4 or 5 year cycle. I think, and this is also thinking about like their own incentives as they are building their audience, that they also need to continue in that lane, because if they pivot, they will probably lose the audience they build, right? So we're looking at years and years of this just becoming their thing while they grow their audience. But then there will be other people looking at Bitcoin completely different compared to these people who are doing the same, propagating some very unique view, getting an audience, growing that audience. I think the more these people grow, maybe at the highest, you will see both of their audiences converge and kind of like they follow the same. But in the very beginning of this, it's going to be probably a lot of separation happening, right? So you will have a lot of people understanding Bitcoin by discovering this influencer for the first time and be like, okay, this guy speaks my language. I now understand Bitcoin the way he speaks about Bitcoin. While other people are understanding Bitcoin in a completely different way, completely isolated, never seen this influencer, but looking at this influencer and following this influencer over a longer period of time. I think this will now create, as Bitcoin adoption grows, a splintered Bitcoin community where you have large groups of people from all over the world understanding Bitcoin in their own very unique way, but never touching, the cryptography part, or never touching the P2P part, but just like have a very one-dimensional way of understanding Bitcoin, which, a Bitcoin maxi who kind of like understands everything, all aspects of Bitcoin, will look at them and say, these people are noobs, these people are not real Bitcoiners, these people just don't get it. But I think that is going to be the status quo sooner than you think. And all these like Bitcoiners who are like true, who understands like all these different things at once, is kind of like a dying breed. And these people will just like disappear in like a rage, in a flame war, because I feel a lot of these people will not think these newcomers will get it. But as Bitcoin adoption grows more, that's just how it's going to look like.
Yeah.
Right?
I think we almost have a perfect analogy for Bitcoin in the real estate space. Mm-hmm. So we can look at real estate. Just look at the investors, right? There are whole sections of the real estate investment community who say, no, you should always go for cash flow. Mm. And there's another section that says cash flow is for chumps. You should always go for capital gains. Mm. There's one section who says, of real estate buyers, I might say, real estate should serve a function for society as a home, as a shelter. There's another that's, real estate investment trusts, financializing homes and, and then there's one part that says commercial property, no way, it's too risky, long leases, long vacancies. I only buy premium residential properties. Others buy hotels only, right? You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. Everyone comes at it from the point that suits their purposes. And with any investment, I think it's got to take you from point A to point B. And it's up to the individual to define what their objective is. Mm-hmm. It's not for anybody to tell anybody else what Bitcoin is supposed to do for them and how they are supposed to engage with it, in my opinion. Mm. Yes, we do have the origins of Bitcoin entrenched, steeped in the cypherpunk traditions about self-sovereignty, privacy, security, all of that stuff, right? But there are all a bunch of other properties that give Bitcoin its virtues, that people should have the choice if we are going to be true to, like a lot of people push Bitcoin as a tool of sort of libertarian ideology. I don't necessarily agree with that. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to do that, then you also believe in freedom of choice, don't you? You believe in free markets. And so you have to allow people to express their choices in free markets and respect what their choices are. You don't have to agree with them. You don't have to be a proponent of those choices, but you have to be a proponent of choice. So I think real estate is a very similar thing. We just look at, there's nothing in Bitcoin in terms of the people and the community dynamics around it that's particularly new. Bitcoin itself is an innovation, but the community around it, the behaviors, the conflicts, the arguments, we can find analogs in just about any sort of investment community. And I think real estate is a perfect one because there's no such thing as just real estate. There are many different purposes and many different vehicles for use cases, vehicles, all sorts of things.
And just one use case is enough, right? Like Bitcoin, like if a store value is doing what you want it to do and that serves your need, that's it. What do you want to care about cryptography or eCash or anything? Why do you care about running a node?
Oh, no. And as someone who's like 99.9% use case for Bitcoin at this point in time is as a store of value. Yeah. I absolutely love the innovations that are being pushed by Kali, for example, and all the various people working on payments. I love that. The Lightning Network, Liquid, eCash, all these things that I don't even really understand from a technical point of view. I consider myself an end user consumer of products, and I think I have a pretty good sensibilities for what the user acceptance threshold is going to be for that sort of thing. I love all of that, and you know what? I hope it gets there. It's not there right now, and so don't badger people into using things that are not convenient for them. Make them more convenient. And I have this same argument with people who create wallets, and they couch the arguments in terms of an IQ test or laziness. And I think that is to the detriment of your business. Even though your business is growing, it could be growing much more if you develop according to the sensibilities of your audience.
Totally.
One of the lessons I learned from a very, very, I wouldn't say very early age in my life, but in my working life, is that when a company starts talking about educating its customer, that's the beginning of the end. That's the beginning of the end.
Because you shouldn't be having to educate something. You should abstract whatever you had to abstract away so that it's no-brainer for people to use.
I worked at a sporting arena that was as a new construction. I came on board just as they were finishing it off. We did all this sort of onboarding, the training, everything. They were going to introduce a brand new sort of ticketing concept to the Australian market, to the Melbourne market, that we were not, we were not accustomed to attending stadium events in that way. And they pushed and they pushed and they pushed, and they just kept blaming people for not understanding the stadium rather than the stadium accommodating the customs of the population. Mind you, I don't know that many people would know this about Melbourne, but Melbourne is an insanely crazy sports city. Yeah. There's we have a local game called Australian Rules Football. Routinely 40, 50, 80, 100,000 people go to a game. And in one town, we've got in one city of about 4 million people, we have 10 teams.
Wow.
Right? So it's like the center of the national competition. And we are crazy about, so the idea that you're going to build a new stadium and try to educate a population that goes to a stadium event every other week, since they were little kids, it was just craziness. And when I experienced that as working in customer service, and I just hear, once we'd get a general manager say, oh, we need to educate the public. And I'm like, mate, it's been 6 months. Yeah. You're either not educating them well enough, or the idea of educating your customer is just a massive red flag for any business. You got something wrong if you're talking about educating the customer in order to ensure your viability. And I think we have that friction. It's not a friction that endangers the viability of these wallet companies, but it is a friction that I think limits their success.
100%. I think you can take it all the way up to Bitcoin itself, not like an end product of Bitcoin, but just Bitcoin as a concept itself. Because, you're right. I think a lot of, for example, if you take Milei, let me just use him as an example. The way he rose to fame before winning winning the presidential election was like the peak of his momentum. before he won in 2022, there was like a good 4 or 5 years. I discovered Milei back in 2018, and he rose to fame through, in Latin America, in Argentina, we have a lot of these like TV debates where you have just people that hate each other. They just like put them on a panel and just like go at it.
I imagine he'd thrive in that sort of scenario.
He owned every single one. Okay, because he. Obviously it was preaching. When you think about like what is the message that Milei had was, things like Austrian economics, Hayek and Mises and stuff like that, which usually, if you take a look at like the Mises Institute in the US and stuff like that, and you kind of like consume that content, it's all very academical. It's all very, not very user friendly, let's say. Milei took that, which are kind of like crazy concepts. Like if you've ever read, I don't know if you read Mises or Hayek, but it's tough shit.
For a Bitcoiner, I'm really not that interested in deep diving into economic ideology. No, right. I find it boring and dry.
You're better off. Your sanity is way better off. But Milei took all of these concepts, which are very hard to grasp if you just sit down and read these books. And he kind of like, the way he presented it was so effective that an uneducated 48-year-old from the slums of Buenos Aires could understand, because he was also packaging these messages into Argentine reality. So he took these contrasts and he said, this is the problem, this is why, and I know that you feel this problem. You have this pain point. I know it so much. Here's why. And then his delivery was like, he screamed. He is very passionate. His demeanor is very, his looks are very, different. So all of that made something so complex as Austrian economics become a household thing in Argentina, to the point where he actually won a presidential election based on those messages. Bitcoin is the same. You have all these like white papers, the very academic approach to cryptography and stuff like that. And a lot of people, I remember, if you remember Clubhouse, so many people came into these rooms and like, hey, I'm interested in Bitcoin. Where should I start? And I lost count at so many people saying, go read the white paper, come back tomorrow, and ask me anything.
Do the work.
Nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to read the fucking white paper. I'm sorry.
But you know Carla and Walker, the crypto, they started off as a crypto.
Oh,
couple.
Yeah.
So like, they did a famous, it's famous to me, a skit about a maximalist who is just ever more and more demanding of someone who just wants to like buy some Bitcoin. No, you've got to buy it in a certain way, in a certain like, mate, I don't want P2P and multi-sig, and I just want to buy some Bitcoin. No, go and read this. And it's just, why are you making this so hard?
Yeah. And so many of these discussions, like, I don't know, BitVM and stuff like that. Working at Blockstream, you get, very close to all these like novel, bleeding edge inventions and technologies. And my thing for a while, when BitVM started to become a thing in the Bitcoin X timeline, was, cool. Where can I use it? Where can I test it? And there was nobody answered, because there is no product. There's just thoughts in people's minds and just mental masturbation happening on the timeline for years and years, right? People don't care. People just want to fix their own lives. They don't care about like belonging to a certain tribe that is right or wrong about. Well, some people do. There's a very special kind of character who is attracted to these type of ideologies and the sense of belonging to a community and being on the right side of history. But the majority do not. They have a life to live, and they just want to, do simple things. And I think Bitcoiners have done a disservice to adoption. I think we would have been way further on in the adoption cycle if it weren't for the fact that so many of the loudest voices had all these like attachments, all these like, you can buy Bitcoin, but these are the strings attached. It makes absolutely no sense, and no wonder we are losing, talented engineers to Ethereum or other chains, because just it's more welcoming. People need that sense of like, hey, I can maybe fuck up and do something wrong, but you don't need to like kill me for it. And Bitcoiners have lost that,
Just to, I guess, draw upon an analogy. Imagine if before you had you see an iPhone and you love it, your first time, it's beautiful. But Steve Jobs says before you're allowed to buy this iPhone, you need to go and read up about industrial design to truly appreciate what we've built for you. And then go and read about semiconductors right? Go on, and this beautiful touchscreen that we've made, go and read about the process that we've innovated to create this touchscreen, beautiful Gorilla Glass or whatever the hell they've called it. It's just absurd.
It is.
So I want to touch on orange pilling because there's two aspects that I'd like to ask you, two questions. What do you think the top 3 mistakes are that people make when it comes to orange pilling? Someone who's merely expressed an interest or curiosity about Bitcoin.
The biggest one is that whatever convinced you during your journey, it's not going to be the same thing that will convince the guy that's asking you about Bitcoin. So, understanding Bitcoin or grokking it or whatever is a highly individual journey, I would say. Yes, there are people that you can ask. There's a community that you can be part of. But most of the time is you listening to hours and hours of podcasts, reading a bunch of books, or reading a bunch of stuff on your timeline and developing your own sense, your own sensibility, your own understanding of what Bitcoin can be for you, and then convincing yourself about it. And in the process of that is unlearning a lot of stuff that you have received through public education or whatever. So it's a very arduous journey that only you can actually drive, right? You can be influenced and stuff, but you are the driver of this because it's a very deeply personal switch in your head that you need to do in order to understand Bitcoin. I think so, at least. So once you do that, there's a list of arguments that you heard, that you learned in that process that stuck with you. And that is your personal understanding of what Bitcoin is. Now, if somebody else comes and asks you, that person does not have the same background as you, doesn't have the same experience as you, are not interested in the same things you are interested in. So if you just recite these arguments that convinced you and say, this is why you should care about Bitcoin, it's probably 9 times out of 10, 9.9 times out of 10, the same arguments is not going to stick with that person. So the first thing that people are doing wrong is to sit down and ask them, what do you care about?
What is your pain point? Marketing and sales speak. Yes. Find their pain point and ask them questions. Right. Get them to talk.
Yeah. Why are you interested in Bitcoin? Why did you come to me? Tell me these reasons. And then if you're good enough, you'll be able to translate whatever pain that person has into the solution that Bitcoin can offer. If you are able to do these things, good on you. But that's not the majority of people. Majority of people are saying, go read the white paper, bro. Come and ask me anything. I'm here for you. This is no, somebody.
It's gatekeeping, isn't it?
In a way. And I don't think they notice, but it is indirectly. So that's number 1. Number 2 is this when you have spent so much time and you finally get to a place where you're like, whoa, Bitcoin, I get it now. The first instinct is to kind of go out to the rooftop and just shout it out and just everybody needs to hear about this thing, man. Come on, come here. And that's the second thing that they do wrong. You need to let people come to you. You don't have to act like you're a Christian evangelist in Tanzania and kind of go in there and be totally disruptive and say, come on, and push this thing on people. So that's number 2. And then number 3 is kind of what we've spent a lot of time talking right now, that once they are inside, once they have been convinced that Bitcoin is for me, to perpetuate these this is the wrong way of using Bitcoin, this is the good way of using Bitcoin, that's, I think because it is part of the orange pilling process. After you've taken that leap, there's an educational process after that timeline as well. And what happens after, I think, like you said, people don't care about pain points. People don't care about specific use cases that can make Bitcoin compatible to a very specific problem. They just no, you have to just believe in this ideology or this good way of using Bitcoin. And if you don't subscribe to these things, you're ousted. You're not part of this community anymore. So I think those are 3 things that are detrimental to adoption in a major way.
I think they're all fantastic answers you've given. I just want to add one more thing to that.
Okay.
I think Bitcoiners try to prove how smart and knowledgeable they are rather than to actually convince someone that there is a solution to their pain point. And so in sales, you're a marketing person. If you're doing most of the talking, you're not doing the selling, are you?
Yeah.
But if the customer is doing most of the talking, they're telling you what they want. And I think with Bitcoin, what I've personally observed is people try to impress upon others how much knowledge they've accumulated, and they want to demonstrate just how smart they are as a result. And it just doesn't work. I've never seen that work.
Yeah. I think it comes from, I don't know. I've been exposed to a lot of deeply like insane technical people through my job at Blockstream, with people inside the Blockstream, but also partners and other people working at interesting companies. And I do think like when it comes to this like engineering mind state, there's a very binary way of thinking of the world, because code is binary, right? Like you do something a certain way, it will work or it will not. And I think they bring that over to life itself, where it's like there's one way of thinking that works and there's another one that doesn't. And if you think in the way that I know doesn't work, you're an idiot because it will never work. So it's like, I think of this engineering mindset, this engineering culture that is, has spilled over the regular culture, where people are just talking and just being humans and not really thinking about the technical aspect, but they bring that technical way of looking at life.
I'm fascinated that you said that, because in the startup world, which I consider Bitcoin is a startup,
True.
Right? The ecosystem is a startup. The engineers are not like that. They are much more open to risk-taking, iteration, failing fast, so to speak. And so why would you think the engineers within the Bitcoin space, perhaps we're being unfair to them in caricaturing them, but why do you think that that's been your experience with highly technical people in the Bitcoin space?
Because the stakes are higher, I think. If you create a accounting software and it blows up to pieces, okay, that's the death of your startup. But if Bitcoin blows up into pieces, that's it. So I think just because the stakes are higher, there's like an added degree of paranoia and very like adversarial thinking.
If your security architecture fails, that's gone.
Right.
If your cryptography is botched, that fails.
Yeah. And working at Blockstream, with people who are very adversarial in their thinking, because Blockstream creates protocols and implementations of Lightning and stuff that if it blows up, man, that is detrimental. And so me as a marketer, even though I never touched one line of code at Blockstream, I kind of like, my thinking has been affected by that. So, that's why I created Perception to begin with, because I saw that as a VP of marketing and communications at Blockstream, I needed like a view of what is happening around and the entire internet in terms of what's being discussed about Bitcoin, who is doing the discussion and how it's being received, and maybe discovering some early trends. And I saw, like, just by going on my timeline, I'm clicking, I'm sending signals to the algorithm, like this is what I like, and I just get to keep feeding the stuff that I already like and not really discovering so much new. So it's like, okay, I got to scratch my own itch and build a platform that really gives you that unbiased, free of any algorithmic tricks, that gives you everything that's being discussed. So,
So let's expand upon that, because we've touched upon your startup. I don't want to ignore that, because I think it's really interesting what you've done.
Sure.
What can people expect when they visit your site, Bitcoin Perception?
Yeah. So it started with me like gathering that data and like just looking at it. And I understood that, okay, I see a lot of like, points in the timeline where a certain narrative is starting to shift, where, just to give you a random example, like for example, an outlet is all of a sudden not covering the energy aspect of Bitcoin at a very specific time. It's like from there to then, it just stopped. And I talked to Daniel Batten about this, because he's like an internet sleuth when it comes to these things, right? And he's a very early supporter of Perception. And we were like, it's very interesting to see this shift in attitudes and sentiments by, large mainstream media outlets, for example. But we can't really understand why. Obviously, these are like editorial decisions. But if it weren't for the fact that I was gathering that data, I would just potentially just have like a very skewed view of what the mainstream media is, based on just me being a Bitcoiner and us throughout history getting a lot of like hit pieces being created by the mainstream media and having like a very negative attitude towards the media. But the fact that certain outlets are pivoting changing their stance on Bitcoin, starting to cover Bitcoin more positively when they historically have not done that. I thought that was fascinating. And so this is just one example of the things that you can see when you log into the platform. You can actually see how pockets of the internet are treating any topic. You can literally search for whatever topic, can be as underground as you want. And you can see how it's being discussed online, by whom, and what is the sentiment. Is it negative, positive, neutral? And then you can extrapolate that and see like macro trends and really like dig deep into the discourse of Bitcoin. There was not a tool that existed that did that when I was at Blockstream. So I just built it myself, and that's essentially the origin story.
Nice. And how's it going so far?
Man, we're 3 weeks in, but already it's profitable. I have paying subscribers. I have no idea that would actually, happen so fast. But mostly right now, I see a lot of PR professionals paying for the platform. I think that the use case for PR professionals who have clients in the space, they want to track how their clients are doing, and they want to see whether that coverage is good or bad, and exactly what part of the company is being talked about. So I think there's a very good value proposition for people in marketing and PR, which is great. This is my background, so it's a founder market fit. But I think as I build a platform in the future, I think a lot of people who are just doing research is going to find it interesting. People like VCs who are looking for like startups in Indonesia that are doing payments, they are able to really discover it early in my platform. And I think as more users give me feedback and more people are using the platform, I will learn from them and adjust and make the product better for them. But
and
right now,
have you got an API as well that's
yes.
available for people?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I have it. I haven't monetized it yet, but it's there. And essentially, the data that is running on the platform is those API endpoints. So it's been a really good journey because I'm doing all the building as well.
Yeah.
So I've been learning a lot of how to build a product, how to code, how to do like data engineering, and AI has helped me a lot in that process too. So it's just such an insane journey to be like a solo founder.
How are you doing the engineering? Do you have a person helping you with that, or are you doing that?
I'm doing that.
But you're not a coder, so how are you doing that? How are you doing that?
Well, it's you're building things through natural language. I've been doing this. The prototype of the product that is now live has been like a year in the making, to be fair. Mm-hmm. And throughout that process, there's been like, oh shit, this is bad, scrap it. Because I learned through doing that I was doing wrong things. And AI can be, depends on how you...
I've had experience with it, yeah.
Depends on how you input it. Yeah. It will be like a yes man, or it can actually be a little bit adversarial and tell you like, no, this is not a good solution. This is not a good architecture. You do it like this instead. But you just have to do it. And then you see how the platform works. And you stress test it as much as you can, as if you had 5,000, 10,000 users, and you see, oh shit, at this level, it would break. And then you take the bad code out, and then you start building again. So it took me about 12 months to get to the solid thing that I now have that is ready. It's still in beta, but it's still ready, and I still feel good about getting paid and having subscribers for it. So it's been a journey, and I think it's kind of like a very interesting time that we're living right now too in 2025. I think with the advent of AI, I think a lot of people can just probably build a product that caters to a very specific niche, a very specific pain point, and build a nice company out of that. And maybe it's going to be easier to do that than actually getting a normal job soon, to be honest, with so many layoffs because of AI happening. So there's more power to the individual entrepreneur. And I feel like, even though I pay maybe $400 or $500 a month for all the AI stuff that I have, I feel like I have an army behind me. So it's truly, truly fantastic. And I couldn't ask for a better start right after leaving Blockstream. It's been pretty great.
That's amazing, man. Yeah. It's really good to hear. I've used AI to prototype a few things myself.
Cool.
And one of them, I won't talk about what the idea is, but I spent one weekend prototyping. I don't even think I spent $30 worth of credits.
Wow, insane.
And just to get to the point that I did with that, it would have taken me many, many weeks, maybe even a few months with a full stack dev who probably would not have built the same level of features.
No.
And then once I built that, I hired a developer to then build what I'd prototyped. Because this was 3 or 4 months ago now. Cool. And I don't yet have the time to invest in making sure a vibe-coded app is robust, and I don't think those apps and those platforms are advanced enough to assure me of that as well. But in terms of just like working through it, the clickable version of a prototype, it's so good.
Yeah.
And it gives you the basis to then engage with, it gave me the basis to engage with a dev with some kind of infrastructure and architecture available and an example for them to build around and go like, okay, make this work now.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay.
Have you seen BitChat from Jack Dorsey? He vibe coded that, by the way.
Did he?
Yeah.
But that's something, he does have a technical pedigree, right?
Yeah,
and so and I don't know to what level, but he's obviously has got development skills.
Yeah.
And so if you have that, vibe coding is incredibly powerful because then you can sense check it, you can double check the code, all that sort of stuff. Whereas I literally don't know anything about code. So it's literally, I'm just clicking through to make sure the things pop up and look like they should. And then if they're not, prompting it to fix that. But it's incredibly powerful and empowering. I love it. And it cut my development costs and time from, probably an order of magnitude easily. So
try to make part of the prompt, or depending on how you have your setup. But if you have, like, I love to use something called Claude Code. So essentially I have a whole folder structure, and in these folders I have all these files, these MD files that have like crazy instructions. And if you're comfortable with doing that, then you can really, like what I do and what I did a lot in the beginning is like I had part of each prompt that I had, part of the instruction was like, explain to me in detail why you made these decisions and why you made these design choices. And so they did the work, but they also gave me a lot of stuff to read. And through that process of like reading through how they think and what they think obviously are like architecture solutions that are sound, I was like, okay, I get it. So is that process was like very educational to me as well, apart from getting the job done, of course. So try to add that into the whole workflow, because
I use Replit.
Okay.
And so when I use it, I was literally just exploring the platform.
Right.
And I started with as little information as possible in a prompt, just abstract the idea, the concept, just to see what it was capable of doing. I mean, I've since then discovered that actually you can put a structure to a prompt and you can write entire PDs, right? Product descriptions and product documents. And then that will in fact help it build something even more robust. But one of the problems I had was when I was iterating, sometimes, I at least didn't have faith that it didn't go and change something that we had already sorted out for some unknown reason. So I felt like as I was going through and doing my quality assurance checks on everything, things that I thought were checked, I had to double check again. And it's like, okay, in the process of changing this, have you also changed anything else? And I just found that a little bit exhausting. At some point, I'm like, I think it's time for a dev now. It looks kind of all right. I know it's not functionally perfect, but it looks 90% of the way there. It's time for a dev. But if I were to do it again, I'd do something similar to you. And I think I know that Replit as a platform has advanced so much since the time I was using it just 3-4 months ago. So I'd probably do it in a more structured way.
I think this is the future though for creators, I would say. I think what Marty's doing with TFTC and
what is he doing?
So he did a Chrome extension. I forget what the name is.
To show the price in Bitcoin. Yeah.
And he vibe coded that, right? It's a very tiny product. It's a Chrome extension. Does one very specific thing. But I think, being a media company that have like these very small products that does something very specific, and you're willing to pay a small amount of money for a subscription or whatever, or for credits, is a good way to capitalize on the audience that you have. And I also see that Marty is using AI for a lot of these videos. He has done 2 now, and I think the first one got like insane viral, got like 5 million views or whatever, and the last one, you've seen them, right? They're pretty nice.
Yeah.
And I think he spends like $200-300 on each video. It's a combination of like prompting the script on Claude, then using VO3 to actually create the video, and then he hires manual labor to edit the videos and add some graphics and some kind of like text overlays, image overlays to like the finishing touches on the video. But like, man, he creates a product and, commercial grade advertisements for a couple of $100. It's pretty insane.
So there's a clue for people who are looking to break into the Bitcoin space. If I was doing that today, if I wanted to break into Bitcoin space now, I would be telling stories through AI, doing exactly what Marty's doing. I mean, I wish, I'm happy and grateful that I've got my account now. But if I didn't have that, that would be the best way to break through all the noise. And I know it suits my storytelling skills as well. So I like writing, I like telling stories, putting together creative scripts and all the rest of that. That's what I would do right now. So if you're looking for a way to break into the Bitcoin space and add your voice to the chorus in a unique way, that's how I would do it right now. I'd be engaging with AI to do what Marty's doing, but with your own voice, obviously, and touching on all the things that interest you, all the things that you want to say. Literally AI giving voice to your opinions, and animation, AI generated animation is incredibly powerful.
I mean, automation, bots, AI, dead internet theory. 95% of the internet might be like very lazy, sloppy AI shit. But that's kind of like that's the edge, right?
That's everything. That's the same with music. Most music is shit of
Film,
every generation.
TV, media in general. Most of it is shit. If you want to stand out, just be the 5% that doesn't do shit, and it's actually a competitive edge that you have. But if you choose to be shit, then you're just gonna be lost in the sea of garbage. But you really, I think that is the future. I think it's great. I honestly, a lot of people, they look at everything that happens in the media and all the automated and all the AI stuff that is happening and all the copycats. And you know what? I think that's great because it exposes the fakesters. It's never been so easy to spot fake stuff. And for someone who actually understands and have depth and have originality, have a unique voice, taps into that, man, the world is yours. Like it's free, it's open.
So when I say don't copy, there are certainly some things that you can copy, like storytelling conventions. You can copy, like the 3-act sort of structure of a story, narrative arc. Yeah, you can copy that. You can copy certain styles of narration, of animation. You can do that, but you've got to be injecting your own individual voice. Otherwise, how do you expect to stand out? You're just doing what someone else is doing, and it kind of like you feel diminished doing that. And I know that personally. You know why? Because when I first started my account, I was kind of just imitating documenting Bitcoin for about 2 or 3 weeks, and I just felt ridiculous. Like I'm like, this is okay. Like it showed me that there's a little bit of traction doing this, and I just felt this is not for me.
Right.
Like I'm not going to be putting together historical facts and memes about Bitcoin.
Right. One guy's success in a certain way is kind of like a validation of the demand. So you can tap into that and get a little bit scrape off, but it's very parasitic in a way, right? So it's way better to just understand what is unique about you and just capitalize on that instead.
There's nothing wrong with, so when I was looking up tutorials on how to draw, and so many of the people who were putting those tutorials together, they would say, when I was younger and I was learning, I used to trace. But like you can't trace as a means of creating art, right? And they're like, that's right. And they're like, because I traced a lot, I became really good really fast. A lot of them would say. And it's a similar thing where you see something you want to do, emulation to start, to sort of, they're kind of like training wheels. And it's fine to do that,
for sure.
Right? And I see a lot of people do that with my tweets. It's fine to do that. But like, bro, we're all watching and it's like, okay, now what are you going to do?
Exactly.
And if that's all you have, or if all you have is a caricature of what you think I'm doing, you're not going to go anywhere with that. What happens when, as the market is now, it's saturated, then what do you do?
Because, you know Hunter S. Thompson?
Oh, sure. The author, yeah.
Basically, his what he did was like he took a book that he loved, some Hemingway or whatever, and he opened the book and started typewriting and just like wrote word for word the greatest books. So he just like felt it in his fingers.
Feel the rhythm.
This is okay. This is how it works. This is how writing
of each sentence. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Sorry,
it's the same stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I started writing after reading Hemingway.
Okay.
Right.
Cool.
Because I know Hemingway, the style in which he wrote was kind of innovative at the time, but by the time I read it, right, I'm like, oh, this is all kind of simplistic stuff. I get it. I get what he's doing. I felt it instantly what he was doing, and I could see the way in which he put together the narrative arc of his stories, that I instantly felt like this is something I could do.
Right.
And then, of course, I wasn't trying to write like him, but I saw the bones of his story before me because of how accessible his prose was. Mm-hmm. I felt that it's something that inspired me to start writing and exploring that, and I really enjoyed it. Have we got time with you, or?
Yeah, we got time, man.
You sure? I know you're looking at your watch, and I don't want. Yeah, well,
let's rock and roll.
I know it's good, but art is something that I wish we had more of in Bitcoin, and so like. Let's talk about Bitcoin generated wealth, can we?
Okay.
Yeah? Because, there's this whole romance of Alan Farrington's Bitcoin is Venice sort of evokes a time of great patronage of the arts, architecture, and there's a kind of yearning on the timeline for, I guess, almost kind of like a return to more classical forms in art, architecture, all sorts of artistic expression, which I don't really share all that much, to be honest. I think every epoch needs to define itself. And then with time, all the shit stuff sort of fades into obscurity and the good stuff survives. And every generation produces art that's worthy of preservation. So I don't share all the sort of doom-mongering about modern art that a lot of Bitcoiners do.
I'm the same.
But there's also, one of the things that's sort of a bugbear of mine is hypocrisy. So a lot of really wealthy Bitcoiners, very wealthy Bitcoiners, and the way that art flourished in Venice, in Florence, was through patronage. And so we're all these really wealthy Bitcoiners who are complaining about modern art. So where is their patronage for the arts? Whereas what I see at the moment is a lot of these Bitcoiners have utter contempt for artists and people of the creative mindset that, they're not really living according to what their virtues are. So what's going on there? Because I've only been in this space 5 years. I can't profess to understand the culture from the ground up, but people who have been around a lot longer than me, maybe they can help me make sense of it.
This is a great question. I've never been asked that question. So it's a really nice talking point. I think... First of all, I think we're doing us an extreme disservice to be nostalgic about other periods in time and thinking, oh, we need to go back. Humanity never goes back. If you really study humanity across all societies, we've never gone back to a specific period. Never. We always develop. We always move forward. That's the nature of humans. So I was recently in Florence and walked around. Absolutely insane city. Obviously there's a legacy there from families like the Medicis and stuff like that. You can still see walking around in the city. So it's of epic proportions, the legacy that they have, which was through financing a lot of these, buildings, museums, art, churches, and whatever. And I think on one side, yes, you could finance an artist to do a piece that will take them 40 years to make because you were on a gold standard, so you didn't have a currency that would be completely worthless or cut in half in 40 years. So you could actually agree on a price today, pay the artist, and be like, okay, on your way. And just create this, and I don't care if it takes 30 to 40 years. Obviously, we don't have that luxury now because if I pay you in fiat and you're locked in to build something for 40 years, at the end of it, you're going to feel like you were scammed, right? Because of fiat just evaporates in value. So that was definitely a reason for why these things were able to become projects, long-term projects that had a start and an end. But there's another component that doesn't exist today, which was there was prestige related to financing these things. Like, oh shit, you got the money to do that? Okay, your family is well renowned now. And there's also like a closer relationship with the church because the church was so much in power. There was no real separation of church and state back then. So if you were like financing churches, you got a lot of political favors, you became well connected. So there was like other incentives that no Bitcoiners are really talking about. They all think just because that society was on a gold standard, that was the only reason, right? No, there was other incentives, political, financial, reputational, that was part of that. So, and today there is a proper separation of church and state. So that incentive is not really there anymore to, at least not in the West. The financial incentives of like, okay, having a family be a patronage of something that is related to the arts is not that prestigious anymore, because I do feel like people don't care that much about art anymore. So there's a loss of prestige there as well. It's different.
I want to pick you up on that point, but
there's still some prestige in that. And I'm a lover of arts. I love modern, I love classic. So I do feel artists that are really good at what they do today, wow, I really look up to them. So it's not gone, but I think it's diminished. And so I think when those components are not in place, you will not have the new generation of like wealthy people like Bitcoiners come in and care about those things. And then also another factor, which is a little bit funny, is that what is considered Bitcoin art right now, it looks very bad, to be honest. I prefer fiat-derived art any day compared to what currently is denominated as Bitcoin art. So, yeah, not a lot of prestige anymore, I would say.
For me, it feels like Bitcoiners have contempt for artists, and artists have contempt for the public.
Yeah.
And so, when, like, it's like Mexican standoff, right? Or like we all hate each other, but we all want good art. I actually think people do care about art.
I think so too.
But I think what I've just outlined there is like the artistic community has such a contempt for the general public, and it's almost like they want to be sponsored without any obligation to create anything that's pleasing. And it's almost, and it's not everyone's like that. There are many sort of, like I spoke to George Bodine, for example, who's a Bitcoiner. I interviewed him in Prague, and we recently published that. And, he's making really beautiful pieces of work, and they're very pleasing to the eye. And it's clearly he's got a style of his own. Or is that Aussie? Yeah. Podcast interruptions sponsored by Aussie. Yeah, it's my dog. He's just wandering around in the studio. So, like, I don't know when that sort of crept into artistic culture to sort of create things and just write the public off as, oh, you don't get it because you're an uneducated Philistine.
Yeah.
There is that attitude, and I don't know when that happened, why it happened, but I think people are always hungry for art that inspires, that evokes, that resonates. People are always looking for that. How good is it when you find, like I find a good song every 3 or 4 months, and I don't care how old it is, but it just hits me in that moment, and I just want to listen to it nonstop because it's just so perfect.
Best feeling in the world.
It is. But in between that time, it's a drought, isn't it? Or you're listening to some classics, almost absent-mindedly listening to that music. But when you hear a new tune, you just come alive, and suddenly you're listening to every beat, every word, every intonation. And I think people are similarly open to being inspired by art, to have that emotional connection with art. But for some reason, we're not getting that supply. I don't know why that is.
I mean, there's a thing to be said about like how visual expression was kind of like the first thing that was found in caves. That came way before the actual written communication. So we have this intrinsic feeling of like expressing ourselves in abstract visualizations, which I think is something that we have kept that will never be, removed from just the fact of being a human. So tapping into that, I think, is always important because it really opens your mind. It really makes you understand things differently. Verbal communication is great. I love it. I'm in marketing. I love to write. I love to read. Love it. But it's something about the non-verbal and non-written communication like music or visual arts that just hits a different part of the brain that you need to activate that part of the brain as consistently as you can. The thing is, again, with so much music being made, it's hard to navigate that landscape. And like you just said, like you are that chase of like hunting for good artists, discovering a new band, discovering a new track that you just like get addicted to. The chase is part of that whole experience. And a lot of people, I think, have a very hard time doing that chase because just where do I start? Like, okay, you maybe will default to Spotify that also have algorithms. So if you listen to 5 different songs that are kind of like the same, the Discovery Weekly playlist is going to be the same thing. You're not going to get outside of that. So the distribution of media are now kind of like in algorithmic traps, and it's very hard for the individual to actually do that chase. Like we did back in the day, we went to an actual record store, we flipped through all the vinyls, we opened it, we read the back. Oh, this is produced by somebody. I know this producer. Oh, this was recorded in that studio. Oh, that's the studio where a lot of my favorite artists are recorded. So you can actually go to a record label and kind of like trust that every single album that came out that was released from that record label was a trusted brand that you can just automatically buy without even listening.
The vectors of discovery have just been totally erased.
Yeah,
when I go onto
demolished.
Netflix, I think the biggest mistake Netflix ever made for me as a user, when Amy Schumer had that comedy plagiarism scandal,
Right.
She was accused of ripping off some jokes almost verbatim. And so the Reddit 4chan crew, unfortunately for her, she then just released a special, and she was for a huge fee, maybe like 14, 16 million quid. And they downvoted her special to 0% or whatever. Because back then it was going by audience ratings. Netflix said, we can't afford to have such a huge investment sabotaged by the audience. So they removed audience ratings and then instituted algorithmic recommendations. So now if you watch Squid Game, suddenly everything that's sort of from Korea has got like an 80, 90, 95% recommendation for being just like something you previously watched.
Right.
But that's not how we decide on our tastes.
No.
For watching at least,
No.
right? So like if you're into heavy metal, you might be interested in that genre. But for watching, we like to watch maybe a sci-fi here, murder mystery there, maybe something that's a period drama.
Yep.
We have eclectic tastes. At least a lot of people, I do anyway. What I want to do is I want to see the wisdom of the crowds, because 97% like something you previously watched holds zero appeal for me to watch it again. Like, I don't want to watch just a different version of Squid Games, which there is a different version of Squid Games on Netflix.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so this is Squid Games, but just, without the colorful uniforms and the dollhouses, for example, the dollhouse decor. And it's like, I think they lost that there. And I think we used to have vectors for discovery that are just being erased from platforms like Netflix. I literally open up Netflix and do not know what to watch.
Right. Yeah.
And I
same.
don't trust its algorithm.
No.
Because I can't remember the last time I clicked on something that it recommended me and it was good.
Yeah.
And they barely survive 10 or 15 minutes. And so what I think they do in the background is they have an internal KPI based on minutes watched rather than shows completed.
Right.
But if it's minutes watched and you think it's all the same, if I watch 10, 15 minutes of 4 shows because I'm searching for something rather than the equivalent number of minutes of one show,
Right.
then how where does audience satisfaction come into it?
And then also the fact that, man, Love is Blind, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Is that that? Okay.
Yeah.
So Love is Blind, UK, Argentina, Sweden. The acceleration of the creation of these similar things that once it's like proven being a success, they just triple down on production. Not only the algorithm tricking you to see different things that are similar, but they create more of that.
Of the
like
same
one
thing.
production company creates more of the same thing. And the speed of that, like season 1 to season 2 is literally 3 months apart nowadays, or even less. So it's like how they shoot at accelerated speed, they record at accelerated speed just to crank out more content, because they don't know when this thing will fizzle out. And those are the incentives that we are dealing with. Apart from the algorithmic, the technical incentives, there's also this like the production incentives. Like, we need to make money here. What do people want to watch? Okay, Love is Blind season 7 in Zimbabwe. Let's make that. Or you see that in the cinema too. You don't see any auteur movies getting any screen time. It's all Marvel and stuff like that. So yeah, incentives become more and more extreme because the fight for your attention is more and more competitive, and because of the splintering, and it is extremely hard. And I don't want to like take this back to like me creating Perception, but that is the reason why I created Perception, because this splintering is going to be extremely hard for people to just keep up. let alone discover anything new. Just keep up to what is relevant to you is extremely, it's going to be more and more harder. Then the discovery aspect of it is like, I don't know, man. I think we probably come to a time where enough people will have your experience, which is the same as mine, and say, this solution is not really doing anything for me. Why am I paying $25 a month for this? Unsubscribe. And maybe this will either create digital solutions that are better, that have different like back-end taste-making solutions, or we maybe go back to the physical part of it. Maybe we'll go back to, maybe record shops will get a revival in the high streets.
Well, one thing that is getting a kind of revival, White Lotus season 3?
Yeah.
They released an episode per week.
Yeah,
and I really enjoyed that cadence.
Me too.
Because it gives you time to absorb the full episode, talk about it, rather than you're sitting there with your partner, you watch one, you watch the next one, and you have no time to discuss any of the character development, or at least less so. So I think things were the way they were for some reason, that it's not necessarily all because of a technological inconvenience or a barrier. So I'd like to see that a little bit more.
Yeah.
I don't think everything needs to be binge watched.
No.
There are some things that I enjoy. Like if something's like a 3 or 6 part series, sure, binge watch it. But if it's a proper season, like a 12 to 20 episode season, I think it pays to have a periodic release that you can get a sort of culture developing around it, but also it gives you the ability to just reflect on what you've watched. And it's one of the things when I have a really good book, I don't like to read it too quickly. One, because of my terrible attention deficit, but no, I just want to read 30 to 50 pages and then just think about it until the next weekend.
Yeah.
I don't want to read it at every opportunity, and in a week I've read 300 pages.
Totally,
I don't want that.
Totally. What you said before, like growing up in Australia, you had like 2 or 3 channels or whatever. And you said, yeah, it was easy back then to manipulate the masses, which is true. But I think the good thing about it was the fact that everybody kind of like saw the same thing, and a TV show that was airing at the same time brought people together, not only in the households, but like many households at the same time watched the same show. It became like this shared cultural moment.
The cultural narrative.
The cultural narrative.
Definitely.
There you go.
Yeah.
So you have like water cooler talk was actually a thing at those times. Like you actually had something to talk about because chances were your coworker saw the same thing yesterday, or something happened in the news, and you kind of like you can talk about that because you saw the same news channel. And right now we don't have these like shared cultural moments anymore. And I was at lunch the other day, and I was talking about a book that I was reading, which is of like the CEO of Palantir, right? Like,
Alex Karp.
Alex Karp.
I bought that.
Yeah.
I read the first section of it.
Yeah.
Fucking hell, bro.
It's crazy. It's crazy what his
I mean, it reads to me like a future confession.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted. You were going to say something. I don't want to color what you were going to say, but I'm like my eyeballs were going to pop out of my head.
I would love to maybe catch up with you again after we both have read the book, and we can talk about that. But Alex Karp is a very controversial figure, very well known in my head. He goes to all the biggest channels and talks, and Palantir makes billions of dollars, huge company. And I was talking about him to the people I was at lunch with, like they have no idea who he was. So you can have millions of followers, you can have billions making in a company, and nobody will necessarily know you. And 10, 15 years ago, if you were a best-selling author, yeah, everybody knew your name, right? But now it's...
But I like that.
It's good.
Yeah, I like it. You know why I like that? I like a plurality of cultures. I haven't had a television I've been in London for nearly 20 years. For about 18 of that, I have not had a television. I stopped reading newspapers probably 12, 13, 14 years ago.
Good for you, bro.
So like I literally don't, I used to sit down and read end to end a whole newspaper, right? That would be my Saturday morning. I don't do that. And so I've sort of stepped out of that sort of cultural echo chamber.
Yeah.
And I think my life has been enriched by that, because what I'm doing is I am dipping into multiple subcultures, by choice rather than being spoon-fed a singular narrative that has probably 4 or 5 editors who decide on what's going to be sort of their editorial line or editorial arc across numerous subjects. And I'm being fed a particular point of view constantly. Whereas now on Twitter, actually, I can dip into right-wing Twitter, fascist Twitter, communist Twitter, Bitcoin Twitter.
Yes.
Sometimes Bitcoin Twitter spans all of those, right? Sometimes I just have to stay on Bitcoin Twitter and I get all of that.
True.
But it actually suits my personality because I'm not, I don't have 2 feet in any ideological camp. I'm much more about practical solutions to problems. That's what drives my political and worldview
Totally.
as well.
Listen, I that resonates with me as well. Like, I love Japanese sculptures. I love rap music. I love Argentinian soccer. I have so many different tastes, and I actively pursue them. And I also want to discover new things within that. Like, my wife and I are like very into perfumes now and fragrances, like stuff like that. It's very, very interesting because everything is connected. You have, if you like food, you like taste, you like wine, wine becomes a thing where you start to like identify taste and then that also overlaps to perfume. So everything is connected in a beautiful way. But me and you, I think we are in the 1% where we actually step out and we say, what else is there, right? I don't think the majority of the world is like this because of the things we already discussed. People are busy living their lives. They got 2-3 part-time jobs because the fiat money is worth less and less, and they have to work more to keep up their standard of living. They have families, whatever. Most people will just get sucked into the vortex of the algorithms, and they're going to have an increasingly hard time to jump out of that. Like, even me, I come here to London and I gotta confess, I love this Charlie Veitch guy.
I know that name from somewhere.
He's a YouTuber from Manchester. Essentially what he does, I think in Manchester every Saturday, they have like this Free Palestine protest, and he goes to them and he trolls them, essentially. And I think it's funny. But YouTube catches that, and now all of a sudden I'm getting like YouTubers who go into these migrant hotels and want to like catch people in the act, and I'm getting like sucked into this far right extremist YouTube content, and I have to catch myself like, whoa, I just spent 40 minutes watching this video. Whoa, I gotta like snap out of it. Most people never snap out of that, and that's because you and I think maybe it's a generational thing too. Like, we come from this like.
I think it's mainly personality. I think young and old people are all kind of.
I like to think that.
Yeah.
I like to think that too.
I tell you what, Fernando, if you want to break out of the matrix, go onto YouTube, sign out, go to the homepage. Yeah. If you want to understand how brainwashed we are, how susceptible to brainwashing we are, sign out of your YouTube, go to your homepage, have a look at everything that you are never, ever shown. And that is what other people are seeing. Mm-hmm. And so we're all in this bubble of our own making, reinforced by an algorithm that keeps giving us more of what we interact with. And we think we're individuals, but actually they're profiling us and millions of other people so much like us that it's scary how much they know about us. They know the next 10 videos that you are likely to spend time watching to like a 99% confidence level, because 10 million other people did exactly the same thing in the same sequence. And they have these content bubbles and network bubbles of accounts and videos that we engage with, making us more likely to engage with, the next step, the next bit of content. And so if you want to break out of the matrix, truly, you have to dip in and out of so many different information bubbles to understand that there's something else going on. Mm-hmm. And for most of us, our timelines, our algorithms are actually curated based on what we do want to see. But actually, sometimes you do need to see what you don't want or what you're not actively seeking in order to burst your preconceptions. Because otherwise, all you're doing is feeding your own biases. And it's okay. We all have our dispositions. We all have our outlooks in life. But actually, one of the reasons why I do love what Elon has done with X, Twitter, is that I'm seeing so many objectionable things, which is the singular complaint of most people is, why am I seeing this stuff that I do not agree with? And I'm like, no, I want racists on the timeline. I want them on my timeline. I want people whose political opinions I disagree with. I want to know what they're thinking, you know, from the anti-racists to the racists to, you know, the statist cucks to literal cucks, right? You know what I mean? Like, I want to see all of that.
Yeah.
And if I don't want to give it my attention, I keep scrolling. But what I don't want to see is a platform that actively censors and suppresses certain viewpoints, which is what I know for a certainty. And, you know, given the Twitter files revelations, we know that as documented fact. They were actively censoring viewpoints that fell outside of what they defined as acceptable. And it's one of the things that I found the most infuriating bit was how these, like, Twitter was obviously captured by what I would call left-wing activists. And I don't use left-wing as a pejorative at all in this instance.
That's what they are.
Yeah, they were literally left-wing activists. And I have sympathies with some aspects of left-wing politics. So I don't use it as a pejorative. But what they were then doing is, in order to hold on to their ability to censor speech according to their pet topics, which was mostly like, you know, the woke agenda, they allowed the co-opting of an entire speech platform by the security state. And it's like, you motherfuckers.
Yeah.
Right? So in order to push pronouns, they allowed the suppression of free speech on a platform like that. I'm like, hey, like, I'm all for people living however they want.
For sure.
But can we keep the CIA out of the discussion? You know, is that all right? Like, that was wild to me. That infuriated me more than anything. And I felt the thumb on the scales of on the algorithm through my account because, you know, I posted 40,000 tweets in 4 years, right? So, like, I'm very attuned to how things should perform. And at one point, I was shadow banned for no reason. And maybe it coincided with a political post I made. I think it was in support of Julian Assange at one point. And that very night, my account just shut down. Like, I was getting huge reach, huge distribution. And suddenly, like, an hour or two into that post going live, everything just shut down.
Crazy.
No explanation, no recourse, no visibility, nothing. It was like an invisible hand just said no. And I found that, like, that turned me. Like, that turned me from having sort of sympathy for some of this stuff, this social justice stuff, to go like, nah, this is what it looks like when authoritarianism starts taking hold. You know, I'm not going to compare that to, like, you know, communist regimes. You know, it's not the same thing, obviously, right? Completely different scale. But I can see the start of a particular culture taking over and then co-opting the security state to enforce an agenda. You take care of that, but you also let us do what we need to do on this side. And I didn't like that partnership at all. I was absolutely furious by it.
Right. I think it's interesting to think about how the dynamics are currently happening, because essentially with the advent of the internet and platforms like X, like we said before in our convo, we have cut out the middleman, right? We don't necessarily need New York Times to be the bearer of truth, and we don't pay attention to New York Times as a channel anymore to get that information. We get it directly from creators, right? But the same authoritarian dynamic that the New York Times and all mainstream media had 10, 15, well, still today, but was very prevalent back in the day, was exactly the same dynamic. New York Times had to answer to authority, to the government, and they were like in cahoots in terms of like, what kind of agenda do we focus on now? What kind of news are we going to distribute? Government and the mainstream media or legacy media, they were working hand in hand, and government had a lot to say about the editorial decisions of many outlets. that feedback or that control over narratives is now being removed away from the New York Times and put directly to you. But it's essentially the same dynamic going on. It's just the third party has been removed, and now it's directly with the authorities to you through the platform that you're posting freely on. So I think the role in mass communication, no matter whether it is an established outlet or you as an individual influencer with a lot of reach has, it just doesn't change. And I think it's incredibly important that we speak about it, that you speak about your experience so people know what's really going on, because it's real. It's really, really real. And I feel like the algorithm is one thing. I think the control that you have as an individual, as a content consumer, is two sides. One, you can either be a passive person who have absolutely no agency and just look at whatever YouTube feeding you and continue invigorating this endless feedback loop that YouTube is just going to give you the exact same content, and you will never ever break free from that, and you're just like a literal mental slave. Or you can be like yourself, and I consider myself also a high agency person who actually control the algorithm and treats the algorithm as a stupid robot that will give you content that you tell them to give them. So you purposefully need to search for something on YouTube, which is completely different from what the algorithm is feeding you, clicking on it, watching it, and doing it over and over again to have a somewhat nice little buffet of different things when you do log in and you see your homepage. But not a lot of people are able to do that. Not a lot of people will do that. But that is indeed the way to go for in the future. To be a self-sovereign individual is to be highly critical of what you're being fed, and taking control and playing the algorithms, doing these type of back and forth dynamics. So you have some control and you are still able to discover something that is actually interesting that is being presented by, let's say, YouTube, instead of you having to actively go for it. But that's a huge leap for any random average Joe, I would say.
I think that's starting to work. Well, YouTube does a really good job of that. I don't use TikTok, but people who do use TikTok say that is probably the best algorithm for being able to predict what you want to see more of, almost to a scary level.
Yeah.
But the two platforms I use most, X and YouTube, a little bit of Instagram, but I don't really pay attention to what's on Instagram.
Yeah.
And X is doing a much better job of that, actually. So if you don't like something, and you say you're not interested in this, show me less, it will show you less of that. Yes. It's really responsive now. It never used to be. The only gripe that I would have is that it seems the algorithm resets every 6 or 8 weeks, and it starts showing you things that you've previously dismissed, right? And so that's the only thing that I'd sort of push back on as an area to improve.
There's a little bit of friction though, like if you take a look at from the platform side, the way they serve content to you is always a risk, right? And the risk here is you just like not coming back to the platform or spending less time on the platform. So I understand their challenges as well, because yes, they can try and experiment something, do some slight algorithm changes and feed you completely different content. Chances are, I think most people will be like, what the hell is this? I don't like it. And then they will have a bad experience and maybe have a different feeling about the platform itself. And that could translate into less users coming back. But at the same time, if they give you something completely different and you actually end up consuming that content, that's a huge win for both sides, right? But it's an extremely risky endeavor because they might lose audience if they give you stuff that you don't really like. So how do they balance that? I think that's always going to be that friction that they just like, they will turn the lever or turn down the lever all the time and see how people change. But it's a tough one.
So it is really tough. And just sort of, if I can give my own behavior as an example, there are things that I'm absolutely interested in, but I don't want to see. Right? Like if they turn up on my timeline, I will absolutely give it my attention and engage with, but I don't want it on my timeline precisely because it's a time suck.
Right.
But there are things that I'm interested in. Like I'll be like, oh yeah, so like, how do you get into that position and choke someone out? Like I'm fascinated, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I will watch that. I'll watch that 4 or 5 times to break down the move. And I'm not really particularly interested in MMA, but it's like, oh, that was a great move. I would watch that. If there was some kind of scientific sort of video about bees or whatever it was, I will watch that, but I don't want to see it on my timeline. Because I have a purpose for being on Twitter, and I'm seeking information. I want to be informed about certain topics, and I want to put my finger on the pulse of some cultural elements.
Yeah.
And when Elon says we want to maximize unregretted minutes, well, like, okay, how do you break that down into a KPI? It's literally time spent on. So they've down-weighted engagement now. So, you know, sometimes you get a tweet that's got like 1,000 likes and 1 million impressions. And the reason why they've distributed that is the algorithm knows when you've lingered on a tweet, whether you've tapped and expanded upon it, that's saying that you find this to be of value. And so we should show it to more people, because if you've spent X amount of time on it, that's probably unregretted minutes, right? That's the way they measure it. And so they serve it up to more and more people. Whereas in the prior regime, I think engagement was a greater indicator of interest. And I still think it should be. I think it's down-weighted too much now. Because if someone shared a piece of content, that's probably the strongest indicator of interest. If you're sharing it to your viewers, to your followers, that's probably the strongest indicator. And then probably time comes second. Likes are not.
No, I think timeline scroll stops is probably it. So you're scrolling and then you read something that stops your scroll. You don't like it, you don't retweet, you don't comment, but you stop and you read it. They catch on that.
Yeah.
So it's getting more and more sophisticated, and that little, I don't know, that little KPI whatever is a clear indication of how passive things are. That judging a success of a message being distributed basically on a call to action is kind of like the old way of looking at it. Now it's like, did it get your attention for 2 seconds? Did it made you actually stop scrolling? And that's essentially the KPI. And that goes for TikTok as well. TikTok has like, and by the way, haven't even been on Facebook or Instagram since 7-8 years, but TikTok is really, really good. It's extremely good, and I'm so inspired by the stuff on TikTok. And X for me is like you said, I just want ideas. I want to plug into the mind of people. I want to learn, and I want to, the format is short, right? So you want to have like high signal alpha by people who said something in a very short matter in text, and kind of like tattoo that in your brain. Whereas on TikTok, it's visual and it's way shorter. But I feel like I want to learn how to cook pasta on TikTok in like 10, 15 seconds. And I don't have to like or reshare anything. I can just stay there for those 15 seconds. And I get a lot of value back from that. And those are the signals that I'm sending back to TikTok. But on X, I don't want to see any, I don't want to see classic cars on X. I love classic cars. I want to see that on TikTok. So the medium is also the message. Like, it's also interesting conversation of like what kind of messages belongs in what kind of platforms as well, because that's also part of this media fragmentation that I'm talking about. People are also jumping platforms, right? It's not all happening on X. People are now hopping to Nostr. People are the leftists are now hopping or have hopped to Blue Sky. So that also fragments and splinters even more. So yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's an interesting.
No, I think you touched on something that's really important, because Twitter, I think, is stuck in no man's land. Before, it was a platform of text and ideas and conversation, discussion. And then it saw, oh, hang on, we don't really do too much with media. Maybe we should become media focused. And so they upweighted. So if you put an image in a tweet, it performs better. Why? Because it takes up more screen real estate as someone's scrolling. They're more likely to see it and stop, and then that registers as time spent on a tweet.
Yes.
The image may not even be necessary. It could be complementary to the message, but doesn't really add any value, but it gets attention. It takes up the entire screen of your phone if you do it in a certain format, right? And so that's what they do. But I think it's wrong. They're chasing a dynamic that's better performed on another social media platform. And what they should be doing is, what are we there for? Most people are there for some kind of information.
Yes.
And then what is the media format that most fulfills that? It's podcasting. And so they should basically be focusing on that rather than cute clips of this or that. That's better off, that's like, they shouldn't be trying to replicate the success of Instagram and TikTok with shorts.
Yeah.
Right? Unless they're highly informative, but I just think they should shy away from that. I think X should be the platform for podcasts, and it could dominate that because it has the single biggest platform for that. It's where people literally come to seek information. And so they need to create, in my opinion, all of the features required for followers to be able to subscribe to podcasts. So like, I like Tucker's interviews. I never would have thought I'd follow anything Tucker Carlson did. But his podcasts have been fantastic. Since he's gone independent, I find his podcasts almost unmissable. But how do I subscribe to his podcasts on Twitter? I can't.
No.
I've got to hope I catch it in my timeline, which is a random for you. Or if I go to followers or people I follow, if I miss it in that river of information that's chronologically sorted, I've literally got to go to his account and then scroll down to find it. There should be a tab where I just find all his recent podcasts. So every time he uploads, he says, this is not regular media, it's podcasts.
Right.
And he tags it as a podcast. It's on his podcast tab. And I should be able to tap a button that says subscribe. I have my own page of subscriptions for podcasts, and they're all there in order. And I just think Twitter is a place where people come for information, not entertainment. No. That's on TikTok and Instagram. Sure. And I think they're stuck. Twitter's cultural relevance was driven by discussions. And I don't think we have that around cute cat videos and wow, look at this sort of nature photography or whatever. We don't have, there's no discussion around that.
Also, what's interesting is like, you have like huge accounts that are like nature is healing and stuff like that are, it's interesting, but what I think is interesting is that most of these media, like these videos, are not really native. At least in my timeline.
No, they're repurposed from other platforms.
You see TikTok videos on X. You see clips from mainstream media, TV channels on X. It's like such a weird and interesting spillover effect that it has because, like you said, they are in this no man's land, and it's a vacuum that they have created. I don't know, probably not by purpose, but in the intermedium, when this vacuum is existing, we see all these spillover videos from other platforms into X. So it's what you're saying is like it's the sign for them to really focus on making that media experience native, so that these spillover clips doesn't end up in the timeline the way it does, because it's completely like every fourth tweet in my timeline is a clip from somewhere else outside of X.
Yeah, I mean the only thing against what I've just said is if they genuinely have a long-term strategy to spin out their video component into a standalone YouTube competitor that's somehow integrated into the main platform as well. But if they do that, like they've done with Grok is now a standalone app plus integrated into the app as well, into Twitter. So if they do that, I don't see any reason why, X video doesn't become or can't become a YouTube competitor, right? Because they've seeded it with enough content already.
Yeah,
they could easily spin that out. And I'd love to see that, because what I find is like 5,000-10,000 views on YouTube is worth so much more than 100,000 views on X, because the intention is different. And at the moment, the intention on the app is to scroll. It's not to watch. And so if they want to do video properly, they have to spin that out, and the platform can be a sort of a pathway to that.
Well, I hope they do, because I do see, like when you click on a native video content, a nice little player opens once you do the tap. So they have, I mean, it looks like on the front end, they're building like a nice video player experience, so you can actually treat it as if it was YouTube on your phone. So hopefully maybe that's a sign of like they're thinking about it and they're building that out slowly. I hope they do, because I couldn't agree with you more on that, because that would be the perfect kind of like accent to the high signal that I'm already trying to find on text, and just have the video version where a certain idea that you see on text, you go into a deep dive of an hour or two where you can really explore those ideas that you see on text in short form. So it would be the perfect complementary media format for that.
I think also, just one last comment on this. I think X has the inverted problem of Mark Zuckerberg's empire, where he's trying to create threads by pushing Instagram users and Facebook users there. And it's like, we're here for information and discussion on X, and those people are on Instagram because they're visual people and they're picture people, right? Mm-hmm. Trying to get picture people to become word people, it's not working. No. Like Threads has zero cultural relevance, and the only reason why they've recently reported a high monthly active user number is because they keep pushing people from Instagram and Facebook to that platform at every opportunity. Nobody natively seeks that out, or hardly anybody, right? And Twitter, X, has the opposite problem, where they're trying to become more generalized when they have a really, really strong niche that they've got a lot of adjacent plays that they can augment their current offering with, rather than trying to become, more like everybody else and losing that differentiation. Once they lose that differentiation, it becomes harder for them to compete, because then why am I here?
They all look the same all of a sudden.
Exactly.
And I think it's the difference between reading a book and watching a film. So when I read a book, or at least a nonfiction book, I love the feeling that I get when I read the text, the images that comes to my brain. I'm essentially creating the TV show or creating the film in my head as I read the book. If I open a book and all of a sudden a part of the page is like a visual, like a video playing from what I just read, it would totally ruin the experience.
It breaks the frame of reference.
It breaks exactly, and the experience in general. So I think, I hope it doesn't go in that direction, because I love X for just tapping into ideas that makes me think and doesn't do the thinking for me. And I think when you want to add those videos, it's kind of like you're asking people to not think and just get brainwashed, essentially. And I love Twitter for that fact that it's pure text. You can interpret it as much as you want, and you have access to the guy who wrote that, and you can comment, and you can actually enter a dialogue with somebody who's not like I'm dialoguing with Balaji on some of the things. He likes a couple of things. He DM'd me the other day. Like, it's absolutely fantastic to have that access with somebody that I really respect and admire, that doesn't know me at all, but we can still interchange a couple of messages around a certain idea. That's beautiful. Mm-hmm. And if this becomes a platform where you're just supposed to like passively watch videos all day, then they're going to lose a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, I think it's the similar trap with Netflix's minutes watched sort of metrics, where it's like, that's too vague. You have to match a metric with an intention. What is the customer intention? What is the user intention on this platform?
It's like Bitcoin.
Exactly. So earlier on you touched on this sort of unifying narrative, and you were sort of lamenting the fact that it's kind of been lost because of the fragmentation of media. And I was saying that actually I quite like that, because the reason why, and we didn't quite get into it, is because I find unifying narratives are always co-opted towards dangerous purposes. And they never sort of just evolve. When they do evolve organically, they're almost benign, and they're never, or I should say, it's difficult for them to be repurposed towards nefarious means. Whereas what I find is that if there is a unifying cultural narrative that takes hold through media, that it's almost always not organic, and there's some kind of nefarious motive beneath that. And we see that from the left and the right. And at the moment, we're seeing a lot of populism, some demagoguery as well. And it really concerns me, because both sides are focused on scapegoating, not solutions. And so whenever I see that, I think, okay, it's all very well and good. You feel good about belonging to a group that you identify as being on the inside, and you get the point and scapegoat people who are on the outside. You feel good about belonging to a group that's in agreement with your worldview or emerging worldview. But what's your solution? What's the day after? Okay, let's say you get everything that you want. You think it's going to stop where you think it's going to stop? Or what? What are you opening the gates to? So that's my concern at the moment is, when I say I have some sympathies with the left side of politics, I'm not advocating for communism or socialism.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
When I say, I agree, there are some issues with immigration policy. I'm not supporting the Gestapo rounding up, Mexicans and brown-looking people on the street either, right? But it seems that there is no middle ground, and it's one of the things that I'm really reluctant to entertain and embrace is these emerging unifying cultural narratives. I think it's always a dangerous thing when there are unseen forces trying to develop unifying cultural narratives. And I think that's where we are right now in this country. So I would contrast all of that with saying I like the fact that the two-party system is breaking down too.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why reform doesn't really bother me, because I now see also on the left, what are they called? I think your party.
Okay.
It's Corbyn and Zara Sultana. So they're now breaking off, and also I would like to see like 8 or 9 viable political parties. I think a democracy is only really healthy when you have an avenue to express your political choice, your political view. Whereas I think our systems are set up to pick winners. And we get this with Americans all the time. Oh, if you vote for such and such, you're just throwing away your vote. So they're sort of railroaded into believing if you don't pick the winner, you're wasting your vote. And I'm like, no. You can vote for someone that gets like 7 or 8% in the presidential race, but you made your voice heard.
Exactly.
And then that person or the cause gets encouragement from others. You've got to register on the radar first, right? So I want to throw that open to you and get your opinions of a wide range of things I've just said, but take it however you like.
Man, it's you said a lot. There's a lot to unpack, as they say. First of all, there's good and bad with everything. I totally hear you when you say, I like the fragmentation of media, that you're like free to choose and you can have some leftist, some right-wing content and then make up your mind yourself. And I do too, but I think we belong to the 1%. I don't think this is a good thing for most people who aren't as educated or haven't been as traveled as us or have time to actually go deep into any type of topic. I think the majority are going to be victims of the narrative warfare that happens when things are splintered into many different pieces. So you will have the same scapegoating that you saw during centralized times. You will see the same scapegoating happen towards like factions that are like fighting each other. And this could be on a political realm. It could be the far right far right versus the moderate right. They could have narrative warfare against themselves, or the far left communists versus like the more moderate leftists. And essentially, what is going to happen is that every single faction, no matter how small or big they are just going to double and triple down on whatever ideology is the thing that makes them get votes or build an audience or whatever. And once they see they have found a formula that works, they won't have the luxury to pivot or to change that message drastically, and they're just going to be like this endless propagandization of the same core message, just repurposed for different times and people. So where's the real value of that if you're stuck in that echo chamber? Obviously zero. It's very valuable if you are somewhere in the middle and you have access to all of these factions and see how they communicate and how they fight against each other to really get a broad 360-degree view of what's happening. But with the current tools that are available, that's like having 78 browser tabs open at the same time, manually scrolling, clicking, and doing a lot of stuff that you don't have the time to do. So, but I do accept the fact that it's a good thing that they do exist, that these voices are available. The ones who can actually find a way to listen to all of them and actually tap into that, they will have a great experience. Like I'm sure you have. I think also I have a great experience just learning from everything and just seeing how people that I don't agree with, I think it's interesting for me at least to see how do they think? How do they explain their ideas? What are the things that they do that is effective that, in my opinion, lead people the wrong way? I think all that is extremely interesting to analyze. But again, I think me and you, we see it from a very privileged, I guess, 1% way. I think most people are just going to end up becoming a victim to these things. And this will turn into people looking at one thing. Like you will look at this can of water, I will look at the same can of water. And because we have different ideologies based on these splintered echo chambers that we live in, we're going to see the same thing and have totally different opinions about it. And I don't know if it's good or bad. It's just like a thing that I see that is very different now compared to before, where you basically saw the same TV shows. We grew up on the same type of culture, and that becomes a nostalgic thing. It becomes part of our identity. It could be translated into something nice and positive. But yeah, I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it's very different, and it's very interesting to see how things are going to pan out.
There's definitely some good and bad in that. I mean, to contrast my point of view, a fragmented media landscape definitely could give rise to radicalization, for example. If you're stuck in an echo chamber, you don't get any dissenting opinions, any different opinions. Mm-hmm. It can give rise to radicalization. I think that's one of the pillars, is that you really only see the world and any issue through one lens. But I look at that as a kind of risk, in the same way that, capitalism and socialism has some outliers as well.
True.
Right? So like, for example, any kind of social program in a country like this, people will pick the freeloaders, and you go, yeah, okay, but what's the greater benefit of having, universal healthcare, for example, right? And you don't go broke because you become ill. But that's a huge benefit to society, right? And it's the same with capitalism. Sure, there are corrupt corporations and corrupt politicians, but we don't do away with democracy or capitalism because of some corruption. We deal with the corruption. And so I think it's a similar thing to that. If we're seeing radicalization, society should enact solutions to counter that radicalization. But I kind of like that political ideas are sort of butting against one another.
Yeah, me too.
Because that's how we discover the truth of things. Whereas if we don't have that friction, like we see on, like, I'm Australian. I've lived in the UK for 20 years and also deeply familiar with American political culture because it just dominates the world, right? And we've been sleepwalking into a two-party system, I guess it's a duopoly over the political system for like 40 or 50 years, precisely because the Overton window just shrinks ever so gradually over time, and before we know it, there are no material differences between the two parties.
Yeah, exactly right.
And all the conflict is almost like a staged, managed charade. It's Jon Stewart's famous, famously, what was it called again? It was Tucker Carlson when he was younger. He was on a show with another guy. So Tucker was representing the right wing, supposedly, and there was a guy from the left wing. But they would agree on all the major policies, except for a few things that were of cultural differences, right? So like, that's why they say they bring up the culture war so that you don't discuss the military-industrial complex. Right. They discuss the culture war so that you don't have a look at how they've been undermining your wages by shipping manufacturing abroad and then, bringing in cheaper labor through various migration practices. So anything but what affects your income. And it just feels like it's just been a charade all this time. Oh. So like when I now see through the fragmentation of that media landscape, more conflict of ideas, I think that's exactly what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I like that. But there is a risk of radicalization. I take your point. But I see a lot of people lamenting the fact that, we no longer agree on things easily. I'm like, good.
Exactly.
Good.
That is it's very interesting that I think in terms of politics, I think a lot of people have a misconception of what politics are and think that politics is kind of like the game of agreeing on and compromising on things. Politics in its core is that clash of different ideologies just having at it, going back and forth, fighting for their truth, for their convictions. You can take the old school democracies, in Greece and Rome, where people have here in Britain, they kind of have the same thing. Still, they kept that tradition of like the left and the right are like in the same podium and they just like throw shit at each other all the time. Yeah. I think that's great. I hope that can come back to the public sphere a little bit more. And I think through the fragmentation of media, that's kind of like you, me, and anyone online can go at it back and forth with different thoughts. And that privilege is not only reserved to politicians in Parliament discussing these things in behind locked doors. We can actually take that discussion, that back and forth in a public arena, which is X or the internet as a whole. So I totally think that's really great, and I think bringing it back to the messiness, the chaos of differing opinions and going at it, I think is good. Obviously, it's not good when it translates into physical violence, but when it's ideas and the competition of the best idea wins, then hell yeah, I'm for that too. What's interesting in Norway, at least, it's been like 15 years since I've lived in Norway, so I don't know if it's the same anymore. But I think Norway, the Scandinavian countries like the Netherlands and Belgium as well, they have like 8, 9, 10 different political parties. And not one gets like an overwhelming majority, and every government is essentially a result of a lot of coalitions between parties agreeing to compromise and okay, let's form the government. And I think that's way better. It's more transparent. So then at least you as a voter, you see, okay, this government is comprising of X percentage of these different representatives that think in different ways, instead of hiding everything under two colors, it's not that transparent, and I think that's why the definition of what a Democrat is or what a Republican is in the U.S. feels so outdated right now, because there's so many different things that comprises the people that forms the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, that it's just like they don't stand for anything anymore.
Well, I think those coalitions are so much more functionally representative of the population's interests than a single party can ever be in government.
Yes.
Because so many voices, even, decent people within the parties, their voices are subdued because it's like, if you go against me on this bill, I'm going to go against you on another bill.
Yeah, exactly.
Are we here to solve problems or what? And so as a result, like a lot of dissenting opinion gets silenced and people just sort of go along, not rock the boat.
Yep.
And, no one's a better example of that than AOC. I mean, whatever you think of her ideals, if you go back to when she was first campaigning for her seat, when she won, and the first 2 or 3 years compared to who she is now, she's basically Nancy Pelosi light now, right? Whereas she actually purported, and in the early days, to have had principles she stood up for and representative of her constituents. Now it's unclear who she stands up for, other than sort of her own ego. It's unclear to me what her purpose is anymore, because she'll say one thing, vote another way, and it's like, what's the point of being here anymore?
Right, and that's why probably nobody talks about her anymore neither. And
she's irrelevant now. Even her own base hates her. The left hates her.
Yeah.
Right. The only people who like her is kind of like the Clinton, Pelosi type political operatives, right? It's like, oh yeah, you go, girl.
Yeah. But in the beginning, I totally disagree with her views, obviously, but at least it's clear.
At least she stood for something.
And she stood for it.
What does she stand for now?
Exactly.
We're talking about sort of the clash of ideas, and I think one of the great features of X, this was going to be Elon Musk's biggest mistake on Twitter when he threatened to remove all likes, because I think likes give you the ability to ratio someone, and I just think that's such a unique thing to X, and it's such a It's such a strong signal, a cultural signal when someone is just doing the wrong thing,
And it's so
and they
funny
get
too.
it's hilarious when you get ratioed, and especially like a massive account getting ratioed by a perfect comment from like a guy with 60 followers or something. It's just you know
best.
the drama of all of that is just so perfect, and I'm so glad it looks like they've backed away from that. And also the quote dunk, like you get someone like Clinton or Pelosi making some stupid comment on Twitter and blocking all replies, and then you just go to the quotes, and they're just what a spectacular view, and everyone's dunking on them. And I picked those two people out not just because they're Democrats, if that even means anything anymore, but literally everyone hates them. Right? People on the left hate them, people on the right hate them, and you can pick the Republicans. Similarly are hated as well.
Mm-hmm.
So right now people are turning against Trump. I never would have thought that would happen. But people are literally turning against him. You're like, mate, we're only 8 months into this. You've broken every promise. Like, what was the point of all that? Right?
And if you had a president that you voted for in 1994 who did not do anything on their promises, you would not really have a view or window to a lot of the people who were, complaining. It was whatever the mainstream media served you at that moment, which was in cahoots with the powers that be. So it's amazing. And I mean, we have so many recent examples. There was like a Harvard professor that just tweeted 2 days ago or something. Okay, I predicted that back in 2018 that Bitcoin was going to be worth $100. And this is why I still think it's a bad thing. And then like turned off the comment, and this is like this beautiful Barbra Streisand effect, where it's just like you think by turning off the comments that you won't have people commenting. Oh wait, let me quote the shit out of this.
Tweets. Yeah, the quote tweets are a sight to behold.
And so and then the European Central Bank is always a classic. They just put something out like the euro is the strongest ever, and then you have like a bunch of the same Bitcoiners. You just see a tweet and you see like, hey, I'm going to go into the comment section and see my family, who's going to be there commenting, and it's like such a great experience. It's beautiful.
Fernando, it's been 3 hours. And I feel like we could easily go another 3 hours.
100%.
It's been a fantastic conversation. I hope the audience enjoys this. It's not the usual conversation we have, but we touched on all the required Bitcoin things and just see where it led us. And I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much for coming into the studio. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you.
And tell people where they can find you and your website, Perception.
Just Google Fernando Nikolic if you want to find my social handles. It's and Bitcoin Perception if you want to find.
Is it Bitcoin Perception or BTC Perception?
BTC Perception, Bitcoin Perception. I got all the domains.
Oh, good for you. Good on you. Good on you.
Yeah. So
and good luck with your new venture, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, man.
Thanks, Fernando.
All right, thank you.
Cheers.